I'm Jared Smith.
And I'm Nick Nenad.
And on today's show, we have a great episode coming up for you guys. This is going to be an all NFL show giving our preview of all 32 teams, breaking each team down, giving a little play-by-play of how we think each team is going to do this year. And then towards the end of the show, giving our predictions on who we think is going to make the playoffs, win the Super Bowl, MVP, all that type of stuff. So if you're an NFL fan, this is the show to listen to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm very excited. We have today is Wednesday, September 6th, and tomorrow.
That means there's one more day till football.
One more day. And then tomorrow we get real live NFL action.
Patriots and Chiefs.
Patriots and Chiefs. Can't wait. So really excited to be doing this show today. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing good, man. I'm excited for the show.
Yeah.
I've been preparing for it for a long time.
I see you've got your notes all written down.
I have my notes, so if you hear me flipping papers, that's what it is. Because I go old school 90s style.
Nick is very old school. I've got my laptop over here, and Nick still likes to write everything down. So good for you, man.
Exactly. Well, I would probably use my phone, but we got to use the phone as the recording device today.
Okay.
That's what you're hearing for people that are listening, or they're listening on YouTube. You're actually going to be hearing our recordings off of a phone. So it will sound the same. But it's just I gotta hold this thing out the entire time. So
Nick's gonna get an arm workout today.
Yeah. I mean, this is arm day for me.
That's right, man.
Yeah, leg day is tomorrow when I'm watching football.
Curls for the girls today.
Yeah, exactly. That's a fantastic. That's a fantastic analogy.
That's right, man.
Okay, but we're gonna get started to start the show. We're gonna get started by we're gonna do a little news. From the past week, just to give everyone updated. We're not just going to go straight into the preview yet. Just talk about some stuff we want to talk about. So I think we want to start with the fact that today they announced that yesterday, Tuesday, they announced the Buccaneers-Dolphins game is getting postponed due to Hurricane Irma, which is supposed to be another devastating hurricane supposed to hit the United States. So we're praying for anybody in Florida that's going to get hit by this thing. I mean, we already had to deal with Houston getting hit by one of the worst hurricanes, or if the worst hurricane of all time, just a week or two ago, and now there's another one bearing down in Florida. So my prayers are with those people in Florida. But talking about the NFL, they're going to cancel this game between Tampa Bay and Miami, and they are going to make it they're going to make it up on Week 11 because they both have buys that week. So there's going to be no Week 1 game for the Miami Dolphins or Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jared, what are your thoughts initially on this change?
First of all, obviously our thoughts and prayers are with anyone that is going to be affected by this. And this is staged as a Category 5 hurricane, which is the highest level category there can be.
That means it's 150 mile an hour winds or more.
Yes, I believe it was staged at 158. Obviously that is, safety is the first and foremost when we're talking about this type of hurricane, but actually talking about the football side of it, I do not agree with how the NFL handled this situation, and I'll give a couple reasons. Not necessarily because they wanted to postpone the game. I completely understand that, but I would have preferred if they would still played Week 1 and moved it to a neutral site and or played the game earlier in the week, as in played on Friday or Saturday or something like that, potentially before the hurricane came. The reason why I don't like the NFL moving this game to Week 11 when both teams have a bye is because now, even though both teams aren't going to be playing this week, so they technically have this week off, they will now have to play 16 straight games.
Yeah, that's
They
terrible.
will not have a break during the regular season. And to me, that comes down to player safety, which the NFL supposedly is all about, right?
Yeah.
To me, that's being hypocritical because at the end of the day, when you have to play 16 straight games in the NFL, now, Nick, you and I have not been in that situation. We've never been NFL players.
Obviously.
But I have played football before, and I do know what it's like to get banged up and have to play week after week after week. So to do that for 16 straight weeks and not have a single bye week, I think that is going to affect both of these teams going down the stretch. And really, more or less for player safety, I think that's where the NFL kind of screwed up on this. What do you think?
It's an interesting take on it. Obviously, it's tough to schedule with hurricane. I don't know when that hurricane's supposed to hit. I would have done it on Thursday. Just had 2 games. I don't necessarily know what you do with TV. I don't really think that matters. I think most people are excited about the Patriots-Chiefs game anyway, so I think you could just put both games on that day. It's happened with baseball games before, where they've just put games on random days or at random times of the day because they just need to get it over with. But I agree with you. No, I think they needed to do this before week 11. They needed to not have them play 16 games in a row. Figure out a way where possibly they could play and just have maybe 2 short weeks and then a bye or something like that. Maybe do it right before the bye week. Have them play 2 games in 1 week. Have them play a Wednesday game and then a Sunday game or something crazy like that. But I do think it's tough. You're right. It is tough to play 16 games in a row, and it's an unfair advantage. I mean, these are 2 teams when we do our previews that I believe we both think are going to have solid seasons. I don't think we believe that both these teams are going to be terrible. So I think they're going to be kind of in the thick of things at the end, especially Miami, at least in my take. So it is going to be, it's a challenge. It's going to be a challenging season for these 2, and it sucks that it obviously is due to something like a hurricane, which you can't put away a hurricane. You can't stop a hurricane. So it's just going to happen. But I agree with you, now that you brought that up, that they probably should have moved this to Thursday or Friday. I just don't know when the hurricane's supposed to hit, so they might have taken that into consideration as well.
Yeah, no, like I said, and I think this really just goes back to the players. You want your players to be healthy and give them the best opportunity to go out and do their jobs. But when you have to play 16 straight weeks, that's just a lot on a player's body.
Yeah,
individually.
No, it is.
And I think sometimes the league doesn't necessarily take that into account. Now listen, like you just said, you can't stop a hurricane, and there's no telling when it will come, when it will hit, how long it will hit. We understand that, but we feel like whether they play the game on Thursday or Friday, that this situation could have been handled differently, and a little more in the interest of the players. So hopefully this doesn't affect either of these teams as far as health or injury wise, and they can figure out a way to get their bodies right for the 16 game stretch. Like I said, I believe that the Buccaneers have a solid chance of making the playoffs. I think the Dolphins won't necessarily do that, but I don't think either of these teams are scrubs.
No, they're not. They're not going to be the Browns or anything like that. Yeah.
No, not at all. But at the end of the day, it goes back to safety. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. So both of these teams will have their bye week 1, which is very unusual.
Yeah.
So they will have an extra week to get prepared for their week 2 matchups, which will be their season openers. But as for the rest of the NFL, they will just have to move on without them.
Yeah, well, another interesting thing to think about is the fact that the starters are essentially not going to play for 2 straight weeks, because you wouldn't have played week 4 unless you're having a position battle, which none of these teams at least had major position battles, especially at big positions like quarterback. Both of them have a quarterback for this season. So, they kind of make them now take 2 weeks off, and now this week 2 matchup, I think that is also an unfair advantage for whoever they play. I don't know exactly who they play in week 2. I haven't looked that far into the schedule yet, but it's just another thing. Also, fantasy football-wise, it kind of messes with a lot of people's teams. Not that that's that important, but a lot of people do play fantasy football, and anybody with these Buccaneers and Dolphins players now doesn't have a player for week 1 to put in their team.
Myself included.
We were just talking about, we both have Jay Ajayi, who's one of the best running backs in the league, both fantasy and just regular, and now he's not going to play. So, a lot of people disappointed about this game, and probably especially the organizations of the Miami Dolphins and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But once again, prayers for the people that are going to be affected by that hurricane. Obviously, the hurricane is the people there are more important than dealing with this football game. Anyways, we just have to talk about it because it's a sports show. So moving on, probably the biggest part of news, and we wanted to talk about this last as far as the news goes today, because we want to roll this into the season preview. But Ezekiel Elliott, who we talked about last week, was suspended for 6 games. He went to his appeal, and there is a report coming out that he is going to remain suspended for 6 games. I'll start because I know I'll let you lead into your kind of Cowboys season preview because of this, so I'll start with it. Like I said last week, I'm going to say the exact same thing. I think it's a little bit of an injustice that he's getting suspended 6 games. I understand why the NFL did suspend him 6 games. I just don't believe there was enough evidence. Obviously, I'm not in the room, so I can't say for sure what went on. But from the outside looking in, it looked like the guy didn't do too much. The fact that he was already bailed out of a U.S. court and said that he didn't do any wrong. He wasn't charged with a felony or anything like that. This is a domestic violence issue, so the NFL took it up and said, you know what, any domestic violence issues, we're just going to suspend guys 6 games. So now this sets the precedent. Now every single person even involved in a domestic violence case has to get suspended 6 games, or there was some sort of favoritism or something toward Ezekiel Elliott to suspend him because he's a star and he's a young guy. So it's still interesting. He's going to be suspended six games, although he does get to play week 1. So the NFL did get their big Sunday night game in, and they're going to be able to get their ratings in for Sunday night because it's Giants and Cowboys. And then Zeke will get suspended for the next 6 games after that. So he won't play week 2 through week 7, and they're still trying to figure out if he can even stand on the field or not. There's a restraining order issue too with this, but nonetheless, he's suspended 6 games. I don't agree with it, but what it means is the NFL needs to set this as a precedent, and the way they did this one, which was kind of screwy, now you're gonna have to deal with this with any other domestic violence case. Jared, take it away.
Yeah, screwy. Interesting word that you used. No, I obviously do not agree with this. The way that the NFL handled this situation as well. Once again, I think for me, I want to start off by saying this. I think the NFL needs to completely get away from this whole investigation and ruling of courts type thing.
I 100% agree.
The NFL is a football sports business. They are not in the business of an investigation or trying to be a court ruler or anything like that. So for me, whether this is Ezekiel Elliott or one of the other 1,800 players in the NFL, I'm not saying this because I'm just a Cowboy fan. I think the NFL, they think because just they're the top dog and they're the number one, sports, they're at the top of the sports as far as the 4 major sports, NFL, football, baseball, basketball, and hockey. They're up top. They feel that they can just do whatever they want. And to me, it just seems a little tricky. The fact that you want to suspend a guy for 6 games, but yet he could play week 1 and then he has to miss games 2 through 7. Oh, you brought up an interesting point.
Yeah.
Because the Cowboys are playing on Sunday night, because it's Cowboys Giants, because the ratings are going to go up. I wonder why. Yes, of course they're going to let him play week 1. They came out and said that yesterday on Tuesday there was a 1 p.m. deadline for when the arbitrator had to make a ruling. And if he did not make that ruling, then Ezekiel Elliott would receive his game check for week 1, whether he played or not. So the fact that the arbitrator did not make the ruling by 1, so his deadline was past due, Zeke was going to get paid regardless. And so I guess they figured, well, if we're going to pay him, we might as well let him play.
Yeah.
Sure, fine, great. I listen.
It make a lot of sense, right? It's like they're making this stuff up.
That's what I'm saying.
Seriously, it's like they're making this stuff up on this. But they're like, well, let's just let him play.
Yeah,
it's just random.
And then suspend him for games 2 through 7. To me, if you're going to suspend the guy, suspend him week 1, whether you pay him or not.
Yeah.
And listen, your ratings are still going to be there. But just very, very interesting. And then another point that I want to bring up is the fact that Ezekiel Elliott and his entire camp, the reason why I believe they are pushing so hard with this and not giving in an ounce regardless of the fact that the NFL upheld the 6-game suspension is because I think they feel that this should not be a domestic violence case. And I think that's the biggest issue, and those 2 words, domestic violence. Ezekiel Elliott does not want to have his name in the same sentence as domestic violence, and he, along with his camp, does not believe that there was any type of domestic violence abuse that was involved with his ex-girlfriend back at Ohio State before he was drafted. So because of that, I think that's why they are choosing to take this to court all the way to the very top and are willing to go as far as they need to go in order to get a fair sentence, or at least have this all go away.
Yeah.
If this were just if Ezekiel Elliott got in trouble because he was smoking pot and he had a 2-game or 4-game suspension, or if it was something not as serious as domestic violence, I feel that the camp would not be pushing as hard, and they would potentially accept the 2 or 4-game suspension and say, hey, Zeke, listen, don't be an idiot, don't smoke, don't drive 100 miles an hour, don't lift the girl's shirt up,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
Don't do anything dumb like that. If it was that situation, I don't feel that they would be pushing as hard, but like I said, when you say the words domestic violence, that right there is a whole nother issue that is very much more serious. And for Zeke, like I said, I don't think he wants to be associated with that because he doesn't feel that there was any of that going on. So I don't disagree with them and wanted to take this all the way up. This is really turning into, the next thing of Tom Brady back in 2015.
No, it's very similar to Deflategate.
Yes, very similar. When they ended up going to arbitration, they were able to receive an injunction. So even though Brady was technically suspended by the NFL because there was an injunction and it was still in the appeals process, Brady was able to play that entire 2015 season. And then in the beginning of the 2016 season, he was then suspended for the first 4 games. So as of right now, Ezekiel Elliott suspended for 6 games, weeks 2 through 7. They are hoping to get an injunction. If that is the case, then Elliott will be able to play until there is a final ruling. And who knows when that will be. More than likely not until at least halfway through the year, potentially the end of the year. So Zeke could potentially play the entire 2017 season. And then as for next year, who knows? But it's just a very tricky situation. There's obviously a lot behind the scenes that I'm sure we do not know, that only the NFL and the NFL Players Association does know. So right now, a lot of this is speculation. But what we do know, Ezekiel Elliott will be on the field for Week 1 against the New York Giants. And I am excited about that.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. And we'll move this on to now our NFC East predictions and preview. As far as me, due to this Ezekiel Elliott suspension now, I do think this is going to hurt the Cowboys a little bit. It will give them some losses that they more than likely wouldn't have had with Zeke in the lineup. Because I think Ezekiel Elliott, to me, is the key on offense for the Cowboys. Although the offensive line helps a lot too, I think Zeke drives the passing game, drives the running game as well, obviously. So I think this is definitely going to affect the Cowboys. That's why I actually have the Giants ending up winning this division in the end of the season. But I do believe both these teams will be very good this season. But I do think this Zeke suspension will give the Cowboys some losses. So at the end of the season, the Giants end up having a better record. I more than likely would have gave the Cowboys the division, but once the suspension was upheld, I switched my case, and I said, you know what, I think the Giants are going to win. I think Giants and Cowboys wound up splitting the season series as well. And then moving on to the Redskins and Eagles, this is one of those divisions where there's a lot of good teams, and I actually do believe that the Redskins could possibly be a playoff team too. It's going to be tough because obviously they're going to have to play the Giants and Cowboys 4 times this season. Not each, but 2 each between the Cowboys and Giants. And they had to play the Eagles, who aren't a slouch. I do believe the Eagles are unfortunately going to be the last place team in this division, but they're not going to be that bad. The Redskins, it's Cousins' contract year. I think he's going to go for it. I think he's going to try to make as much money as he can, especially after that Stafford contract. He knows he can get paid next season. And as far as the Eagles go, I do believe there's going to be a little bit of a slump for Carson Wentz. It tends to happen to most rookie quarterbacks, or at least second-year quarterbacks. They do add some receivers on offense. They got Alshon Jeffrey and Torrey Smith. And they also added LeGarrette Blount. I don't think that's going to be enough, though. I do believe that the Redskins' offense and their defense is slightly better than Philadelphia. That's why I have them in the third side. But I do believe the 2 clear teams in the NFC East for me are the Giants and Cowboys.
Yeah, no, I do agree with you that the 2 teams that have the best chance of making the playoffs, regardless of Zeke's suspension, are the Cowboys and the Giants. I feel the Giants, especially bringing on Brandon Marshall, another receiving threat and red zone threat. And they drafted tight end Evan Ingram from Ole Miss, who is a receiving threat, almost like an Antonio Gates, just not as big, but he is almost more like he can run just like a receiver. So you have Odell Beckham Jr., Sterling Shepard, Brandon Marshall,
ridiculous. So those
Evan
guys,
Ingram,
yeah.
And you still have Eli Manning, who has never missed a start in his NFL career.
And Paul Perkins can also catch balls out of the backfield.
Yes,
too.
So I think the one kind of knock on this team right now is their offensive line. I think if they have to be able to protect Eli. Eli does like to get the ball out quickly, so that's how he kind of compensates for not having the best offensive line. And defensively, this Giants team was in the top 5 last year on defense. Steve Spagnuolo did a fantastic job with this defense last year. Landon Collins being first team All-Pro, making
probably
his first
could have
Pro
been
Bowl.
Defensive Player of the Year.
He
too.
could have been. He really turned it on after having a subpar rookie year, being a high draft pick. He really came on strong for this team. Going back to the Cowboys really quickly, I still think this team, because of the pieces that they have around them, I still think that they can win this division. It will be obviously tougher without Ezekiel Elliott, but the fact that they do have in my opinion, if not the best, one of the best offensive lines in football.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The fact that you do have Darren McFadden, who did rush for over 1,000 yards the season before Ezekiel Elliott got to the Cowboys, and you have Alfred Morris, who his first year in the league with the Redskins with RG3 rushed for over 1,000 yards and was in the Rookie of the Year running. So I think this team does have depth. What they will have to do is rely a little bit more on Dak Prescott, who is probably going to have to throw the ball a little bit more and improvise without having Zeke there. So I think they can definitely do it. This defense will have to. It's one of those bend but don't break defenses. They don't give up a whole lot of big plays, but you can definitely gain some yardage on this team. So I have to admit that. So it's just holding teams to field goals, not letting teams score touchdowns, and getting off the field on third downs. Let your offense run out the clock, run the ball, and do what they do best. So I'm still going to put the Cowboys winning this division. The Giants are going to be a very close second. I think the Giants are going to make the playoffs this year as a wild card team. Like I mentioned about their offense, completely stacked. Eli Manning, even though I'm not a fan of his, I have to give him props and I have to respect the guy because he hasn't missed a start in his career. And with all the weapons that he has, if they don't produce this year, to me, it's on Eli Manning. You can't have all those weapons and not come out and produce. So that, along with their defense, I'm going to put the Giants in at the number 2 spot. Where I'm going to disagree with you in the NFC East is I actually think the Philadelphia Eagles will come in at number 3.
Okay.
Now, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I think Carson Wentz could have a little bit of a setback. Not much, but I do agree that sometimes there is a sophomore slump because teams now have had a whole offseason to game plan for Carson Wentz.
Exactly.
But on the flip side, Carson Wentz has also had a full offseason to get more immersed in his playbook, as well as study and read other defenses. So it kind of goes both ways with that. The Eagles did bring on Alshon Jeffrey, Torrey Smith, some more offensive weapons. They did trade away Matthews.
Jordan Matthews, yes.
Yeah, Matthews, he went to Buffalo. So they do lose one receiving threat. They added 2 more. To me, this is really about the Eagles' defense. Their front line, their defensive line, to me is very, very stout and very good. Their linebacking core and their secondary is a little suspect. And I think that's where this team is going to get hurt the most. They're more than likely going to be able to put up points offensively, but I don't think they're going to be able to stop enough teams to really win when it counts. So I think that's where this team is going to get hurt. I'm going to put them at number 3. And last but not least, the Redskins, who not because they're a bad team, but I think because of the division that they're in, they come in at number 4. Like you mentioned, Kirk Cousins, I think, is going to be very motivated after Matthew Stafford inked his 5-year, $135 million extension contract. So if I'm Matthew Stafford if I'm Kirk Cousins and I'm saying Matthew Stafford can get that contract and he's never won a playoff game, I can do the same thing. Now, Matthew Stafford has been in the league for a few years more than Kirk Cousins. But Kirk Cousins, this is his 2nd consecutive year playing under the franchise tag. After this season, he will have made in the last 2 years over $40 million.
Whew.
And he's going to be looking to cash in, whether it's with the Redskins or potentially the 49ers or another quarterback-needy team. So he's going to be motivated. It's really the rest of the team around him that I don't know. I don't know if they have the full talent to really compete with this NFC East team or the rest of the NFC East. They got Terrell Pryor from the Browns, who is a huge receiving threat, but they lose Pierre Garçon, who was their leading receiver last year. And defensively, in my opinion, I don't think they have it. I think they almost they blitz too much, in my opinion. I think they're you know what the Redskins are going to do. They're going to blitz you all day long, and they're going to get home sometimes, and I'm sure they'll get some sacks. But I think when you blitz a lot, you leave your secondary very vulnerable. And when you have to play man to man all game long against some of these, the best receivers in the league, Dez Bryant, Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, all these guys, you're going to get burned eventually. And I think that's really where this team struggles is with their defensive concepts and the way that they play defense. So they come in at number 4 for me. So once again, it's Dallas wins the division. Giants come in at number 2 in the wild card spot. And then the Eagles and the Redskins are unfortunately going to miss the playoffs this year.
Yeah, the good teams. The division's really going to kill them. A couple things I want to say just to end the NFC East here is that you were mentioning the secondary for the Redskins. Sua Cravens just decided to retire.
Yeah, is that official? I was reading an article.
I'm not sure about it, but I doubt he plays week 1. Not that will matter too much, but So they potentially lost their strong safety. Now they did add DJ Swearinger at free safety. He's a former Cardinal player. I thought he was a very solid player last year. They paid him nicely too in the offseason to come to the Redskins.
I think he's even worse than Sue Cravens. At free safety?
At free safety, yes.
I've seen DJ Swearinger play, and now this kid can come up and hit. He will
Yes.
knock you out. He'll knock you in the next week. My problem with DJ Swearinger, I do not think he can cover. And as a free safety, when you are that last line of defense, you need to be able to cover. And I don't think he can do that. So I think
I might be mistaken. I think he might be a strong safety.
okay,
Now that I'm thinking about
and the defense of the
because I thought
Redskins
about
play.
Tyrann Mathieu was the Cardinals' free safety last year. So
and the defense of the Redskins play, their strong safety is more towards the box, almost playing like a linebacker. So I think for DJ Swearinger, that would definitely be better for him overall.
Mm-hmm.
He's closer to the line of scrimmage. He doesn't have to cover as much ground, and he can really get in on more tackles. When you're playing farther back, it's more about coverage. Guarding one-on-one receivers, and I don't think that's necessarily a strength of his. So if that's what the Redskins want to do, go ahead, because I'm a fan of it. I think they're just going to get burned even more. But no, that's a great point that you bring up about Sue Cravens. I think right now he's on the fence of retiring or wanting to play, and I think especially when we're getting into week 1 of the season, you have to be all in. And if your mind isn't all there, that's not a good thing. I think he's going to need to take some time and evaluate his situation. And really figure out what you want to do, because if you go out onto that field, regardless if it's the professional level, the college ranks, or even high school, if you are not fully committed to playing the sport of football, which is a very physical sport, you're going to get yourself injured.
Yeah.
So before he steps on that field, I think he needs to really assess his situation and say, hey, I'm all in, I'm going to be here for this team, and I'm going to try my best, or I'm going to hang it up and pursue other ventures. But I think he needs to figure it out because, like I said, if you don't go on that field 100%, your mind's not going to be there, and I think that's just more cause for injury.
2 other things real quick because we got to go to break right after I say these 2 things. 2 players that I expect to kind of break out. Paul Perkins for the Giants. I believe he's going to be their starting running back. He's going to turn into their starting running back. And also Jalen Smith for the Cowboys, I think, is really going to break out. I know you probably want to say something about Jalen Smith. But my 2 players to look out to break out in this division, Jalen Smith, linebacker for the Cowboys, and Paul Perkins, running back for the Giants.
I'll just piggyback off that really quick. Jalen Smith, just a fantastic story. Would have easily been a top 10 pick last in the 2016 NFL draft before he completely just messed up his knee, blew out his knee in the bowl game that he was playing with at Notre Dame, and really set his career back in a sense. The Cowboys took a flyer on him in the 2nd round, knowing that he would potentially, be able to come back. And I think the reason why the Cowboys took him was because the Cowboys' head doctor, their head trainer, was the one who actually did the surgery on Jalen Smith.
Oh, that's good.
So they were able to get the inside scoop, and the doctor came back to the Cowboys and said, hey, listen, obviously there's no guarantees when you're talking about nerve damage. It's more of a time situation rather than just, recovery and getting back on the field. It was more about time. So he said, from what I think this guy will eventually be able to regenerate that nerve and get back on the field. And so far, he's been right. It's been a kind of a Jason Garrett likes to say, a day-by-day process. But he's done everything right. There have been no setbacks. And so far, Jalen Smith is looking to I don't know if he's going to start this week, but with Anthony Hitchens, the Cowboys starting middle linebacker, out, Jalen Smith is going to get a lot of reps. So happy for the kid. Glad that he's able to come back and hopefully play and have a good career, because with that injury, he did lose a lot of money, and a lot of teams took them off of their boards. But glad that the Cowboys took a chance on him, and hopefully he can go and produce for that team.
Yeah, it's a good story. Glad to see those kind of guys come back and play. I've seen guys in the past tear their knees up and not end up having an NFL career. So good for that. We'll be right back. We're going to be coming back with 3 other division predictions on the other side of this break. We're going to be doing AFC East, AFC North, and NFC North on the other side of this quick break. This is OC Rock Radio, the Cover 2 podcast.
He has reported to the Pittsburgh Steelers training complex. He just walked in a short time ago. He had said on Twitter, in response to a fan's question about when he would be back, that it would be September 1st. It is September 1st, and true to his word, he showed up at the Pittsburgh Steelers training facility. The preseason is wrapped up. The regular season and an upcoming opening game against Cleveland is on the horizon. Le'Veon Bell would not miss that. He would not miss that when he's scheduled to make $12.1 million.
Yeah, this is tough. I mean, obviously you're looking at Edelman, the relationship he and Tom Brady have, the chemistry they have. You saw what he did. I mean, the kid is, it's the perfect Patriot, right? I mean, this guy plays every week. He's so physical. He's a great blocker. He does all the things that you want him to do, plus his hands are insane. So this is going to be a big loss. But just like every loss that we've seen with the Patriots, whether it's Gronkowski or any other major player on their offense, they will find a way to replace, whether it's Amendola coming in or Hogan or by committee. They will find ways. Malcolm Mitchell will have to pick it up. Gronk will have to pick it up. And that's what they'll call on.
OC Rock Radio back with the Cover 2 podcast, NFL season predictions going on right now. We just did the NFL East. Or the NFC East in the first segment of the show. And now we are going to turn to the AFC East. This is where the Super Bowl champion New England Patriots are. That's the division they're in. And I believe we both think that they're more than likely going to dominate this division once again. There are two teams in this division that are looking to not be very good teams, and there's one other team that's going to be in the middle that we already talked about a little bit. But just to start with the Patriots, obviously they're the Super Bowl champs. An amazing comeback in the Super Bowl, something that we'll never forget. They do lose Julian Edelman, though, and I do believe this will affect them a little bit. I do think, just like I mentioned with the Cowboys, where the Ezekiel Elliott suspension will kind of take some wins away from them. I do believe that Edelman being out might take 1 or 2 wins from them too. So people that they're thinking maybe they were going to be 15-1, 14-2. I personally think now they're going to be 13-3 or 12-4 this season. But I think Edelman is a key part, and it's hard to replace a guy like Edelman. Although they did add Brandon Cooks, I think they had a different role for Brandon Cooks to play, and now they kind of have to have all the guys kind of play a different role because of Edelman being out. So I do think that will affect them. On defense, they do add Stephen Gilmore and keep Malcolm Butler, so they have 2 very, very good corners, probably one of the best tandems of corners in the league. And Dante Hightower on that defense also is a 4th. They do lose LeGarrette Blount on offense, but then again, it doesn't seem to matter too much if they lose a running back on this team. The Patriots are always good, and whenever you have Tom Brady as your quarterback, you're always going to be in Super Bowl contention. As far as the rest of the division, I did say that I do believe Miami's going to be better than people think. I think Cutler fits nice in that Miami system. I think he fits right in. Their defense is still pretty solid. Obviously, we talked about their schedule is going to be a lot tougher because they're not going to get a bye week. Their bye week is this week, so that definitely changes a lot when we're doing analysis. I do think 2 players to watch on this team, Jay Ajayi, obviously they're starting running back, and Devontae Parker, I think, will break out this season and be a good player for them. I think when they go to choose between Jarvis Landry and Devontae Parker in the offseason, I think they're going to end up taking Devontae Parker instead of Jarvis Landry as far as paying for those guys. Moving on to the Bills and Jets, I'll do this quick because I don't think they're going to be very good. No more Watkins for the Bills, and Tyrod Taylor has never played up to his contract, so I just expect all the same. They're kind of starting to rebuild, so there's not much to look at for this team. I do believe, especially being in the Patriots division, they're going to lose a lot this season. I don't see them getting more than 5 wins. And the Jets, being one of the worst teams in the league, I do feel bad for Todd Bowles, but I don't really think this is his fault. I think it's just players getting injured, and the management for this team not doing a good job of stacking the roster. They do have still a good defense. Darren Lee, Muhammad Wilkerson, Leonard Williams, and rookie Jamal Adams, I think, is going to play well. But I think the biggest thing for this, for Jets fans, is to lose so you get either Sam Darnold or Josh Rosen in the draft, because I think they need a quarterback. Because
Are you talking about tanking?
I'm talking about, I'm 100% I'm talking about tanking.
I thought we were talking about basketball.
You remember when the Colts tanked to get Andrew Luck?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, they're gonna be the Brooklyn Nets this season of the NFL. They're just gonna lose as many games. It's the same city, so it works out. But I mean, when you got Josh McCown as your quarterback and Christian Hackenberg as your backup, you're not doing too well.
No, not at all.
So I do believe the Pats will dominate this division. They'll have no worse than 4 wins, barring a Brady injury. I do believe Miami will have a chance at the playoffs. I'm not saying they will, but I do think they'll be in the chase, and I think the Bills and Jets will not make the playoffs, and they won't be very good this season. Jared, take away your predictions.
Yeah, no, I think this is probably one of the easier
definitely is
divisions
one of the easiest,
to talk about. For the Patriots, Nick, I have 2 questions. Is Bill Belichick still their head coach?
I believe so. Last time I checked.
And
Yeah.
is Tom Brady still their starting quarterback?
I believe so. Last time I checked.
Okay, then I'm going to chalk this up as a Patriots division winner. Pretty simple as
Is
that.
this going to be the 54th year in a row that
I
they're
know.
going to win the division?
Seriously, no, I mean,
It's not fair. Move them out of this division. Move them into the NFCs. That'd be fun to watch.
and the fact that this team won the Super Bowl, came back the way they did against the Falcons, and then this offseason had over $50 million to spend in free agency, that's like the Cleveland Browns, except the Cleveland Browns don't know what the hell they're doing, so they can't ever get their money right. The Patriots, however, go out and they get Brandon Cooks, they get Dwayne Allen to get another tight end threat to go along with Rob
Forgot about that,
Gronkowski. And even though a few years back when the Patriots got Martellus Bennett, that was only on a 1-year deal. So Bennett, that was like a kind of a rental thing. Dwayne Allen is under contract for 3 years. So if Gronk can stay healthy, or at least if he can play 3/4 of the season, you're going to have him and Dwayne Allen, who are 2 receiving threats, and Dwayne Allen can block as well. So this team not only won the Super Bowl, they got better than they did last year. Like you mentioned, getting Stephon Gilmore, not only another great cornerback to go along with Malcolm Butler, but they took Stephon Gilmore away from the Bills, a division opponent, a division rival.
They bully this entire division.
Exactly. They re-signed Dante Hightower, one of the best middle linebackers, and he can play middle and outside linebackers in the league. This team just got better. Julian Edelman, losing him is a big deal. And I do agree that I think they had a different role for Brandon Cooks. But because Edelman is out, I think it's going to be between Brandon Cooks and Danny Amendola, who are going to be kind of replacing the role of Julian Edelman as far as the slot receiving game and in special teams with punts and kick returns. So it's definitely a huge loss for what Julian Edelman does. But because this team has so much depth, I think they're going to be just fine. And like last year, Tom Brady would turn Richie Hogan into an absolute superstar. And at the beginning of the year, I don't think anyone knew Richie Hogan's name. Yeah. So, listen, Tom Brady will find his targets regardless of who is on the field, and they're going to be just fine. Their running back corps, even though I don't think they have a clear number 1 running back who would like just start on anyone else's team, they have so many complementary players that they plug guys in, and guys do so much. Guys, they're all versatile. They can run out of the backfield, in between the tackles, outside the tackles. They all catch the ball well, and that's what Bill Belichick wants. He wants diversity. He wants guys who can do multiple things in an offense. So, no, this team is going to be just fine. I'm not saying they're going to cruise into the playoffs, but I'm pretty sure you can pencil them in as the division winners in the AFC.
Do you think the Edelman injury will affect them in the playoffs?
I don't, because I think by the time the playoffs roll around, this team they'll have had 16 weeks to figure out how they're going to replace Edelman, and by that time, if you can't get it right in 16 weeks, then there's something wrong. So, yeah, the first few weeks could be somewhat of a challenge trying to figure out what roles their receivers are going to play and how they're going to fix things. But no, by the playoffs, by that time, you've had plenty of time to get things straight, and I think they'll be just fine.
Absolutely.
I do agree with you that the Miami Dolphins should be, are the second best team in this division. There was obviously big news last month when Jay Cutler decided to come out of retirement and out of the broadcasting booth before he could even call his first game as a broadcaster, decided to sign a 1-year, $10 million contract with the Miami Dolphins because Ryan Tannehill went down with another knee injury. Feel bad for the guy because he just can't seem to stay healthy, but I really thought he was going to have a good year this year, especially with the weapons that the Dolphins have. You mentioned Jarvis Landry, Devontae Parker, Jay Ajayi. This team they've got some offensive weapons. Their offensive line, they get Pouncey back. They're all-pro center who's been kind of banged up the last couple of years. So if this team can stay healthy, I think Cutler has weapons, but I just don't trust Cutler. At the end of the day, I think he's going to be able to get you wins somewhere in that 8-9 mark, and they could be a potential wild card team. But I don't trust Jay Cutler to, when you're in the fourth quarter and it's under 2 minutes and you need him to drive down and score, I don't trust him to make the right decisions. Mm-hmm. So because of that factor, I'm going to say that the Patriots are actually the only team to make it to the playoffs in this division. I think the Dolphins are going to be out by just a game. So I think they're going to be competitive, but not enough because of Jay Cutler to win the division. Moving on, I have the Buffalo Bills in as the number 3 spot. And this team is somewhat in a rebuilding mode, in a sense. They fired Rex Ryan, good old Rex, who's now with ESPN, and his just crazy philosophy of coaching. And they've gone to a much more conservative way with Sean McDermott, who was the defensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers for the past few seasons. And defensively, he definitely knows what he's doing. This team is going from a 3-4 defense to a 4-3 look. So, that's going to be interesting because you have players that are so left over from the last few years past with Rex Ryan. So guys are transitioning to different roles and different philosophies. Offensively, you have Tyrod Taylor, who I kind of disagree with you when you say that he isn't living up to his contract. Maybe if he was getting paid, $20 or $25 million a year, but I think he's only getting like 12 or 13 million a year, which only, right? That's still a lot of money.
Talking about, yeah.
But I think for the NFL contracts that are being handed out today, I think Tyrod Taylor is somewhere around where he should be for a starting quarterback. I mean, they've named him the starter. They want him to be the guy. So he just needs to go out and produce. Unfortunately, when you trade away your best receiver in Sammy Watkins, that doesn't really help. Obviously, you have LaShawn McCoy, Shady, who is still going to do his thing. And I was just reading an article yesterday on ESPN that said McDermott wants LaShawn McCoy on the field for every snap. So I hope his conditioning is up because they plan on handing him the ball a lot. And they did trade for Jordan Matthews, the receiver from the Eagles, who I think is a nice complimentary receiver, a good number 2. He's not a burner, and I don't think he's nowhere near as good as Sammy Watkins. But I think he's a possession receiver. He can get you some yards, and he can get you 5 or 6 touchdowns a year. But they're not going to be able to replace Watkins. You have Charles Clay at the tight end spot, who I think is a very good tight end. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. So there's just a lot of question marks with this team. Defensively, totally. Like we mentioned when we were talking about the Patriots a minute ago, they lose Stephon Gilmore to the Patriots. So that's a big loss in their secondary. So I think it's going to be an adjustment period for this defense. Offensively, I think they'll be able to put up some points, but it's going to really be all on Shady, and I don't think he's going to be able to do it. So this Bills team, I think, will come in 3rd place. And last but not least, we have the New York.
Put their name in your computer either. You didn't
no,
even have to
not at all. The Jets, Jets, who are just going to be awful this year. And I do agree with you that I feel bad for Todd Bowles because I don't.
Todd Bowles.
I mean, you are the head coach, so you do have to take some responsibility. But I agree that it's really the front office and the way that this team is run, which is why this team is so pathetic. The way that they have drafted, the way that they have not taken care of their players. One of the reasons why Darrelle Revis, even though he came back to the team last year, is not with the team this year because I think it was just a dysfunctional relationship. They drafted Christian Hackenberg last year to eventually be the guy, and he, so far, in his first 2 seasons, has just looked horrible.
He is not the guy.
Not the guy. Even in practice, I mean, the guy is just missing receivers wide open, apparently. They have Bryce Petty from Baylor, who they also drafted a couple years ago, who came out of a spread system, so he's trying to learn an NFL pro-style system, which means being under center and not in shotgun as much. And he's still learning. I think he has a little more upside. I think his arm is stronger than Hackenberg's, but neither of those two have been able to win over the coaches in training camp. So they're stuck with Josh McCown, who I think is a serviceable backup. But when you want to start the season with Josh McCown as your starting quarterback, I don't think that's good news. I think that's bad. And for a team that doesn't have a lot of offensive weapons, they lose their number 1 wide receiver, Quincy Enunwa. Did I pronounce that right? Quincy Enunwa?
That's how it is.
Enunwa. I'm sorry about that for mispronouncing that. Quincy Enunwa. They lose him in the offseason to a season-ending injury, so he won't be there at all.
They have no receivers.
And they really have no receivers. I mean, the only hope for this team is their defense. Like you mentioned, they have a great defensive line. They did trade away Sheldon Richardson, one of their other...
to the Seahawks.
To the Seahawks, yes. So they did that more or less for cap reasons and because they just won't be able to pay all these great defensive players. No, not at all. I do like Jamal Adams, the first-round draft pick out of LSU, the safety. I think he's going to be a really, really good safety, and he's one of the few bright spots for this team. But other than that, it is going to be a long season if you're a Jets fan. So I hope you have a secondary team, or I hope
Giants, look at that. They're right.
yeah,
in the city.
and or hopefully the Mets or the Yankees make it far in the playoffs, because
the Mets ain't. The Yankees.
the
will do
Yankees
well,
potentially, because that's the only real playoffs that those New York fans are going to have this year.
Rangers aren't that bad either, because the Knicks. I wouldn't rely on the Knicks or Nets either next year in the
No,
NBA.
no, I wouldn't. So it's just looking like a down year for that New York market, unless you're a Giants fan.
Exactly. Two players to watch. I think we both mentioned them extensively. Devontae Parker and Jamal Adams. I think we both agree those are guys to watch in this division. Let's move on to the AFC North. This is a division that is, in my opinion, it's interesting to me, because I think a lot of these teams got better except for one. And that one team that didn't get better is the Cincinnati Bengals. I think they kind of stayed the same coach and all that. I'll talk about them in a second, but who I do think is going to be the top dog in this division is the team that usually is the top dog in this division, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, their offense is stacked. Le'Veon Bell did come back to training camp, so he's actually playing. He's not going to hold out. Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, Martavius Bryant. I mean, that's three of the best players in the league, and they're all on one team on offense. And Big Ben's still he's a very solid quarterback. The O-line is still very good. Defense is getting better, because I actually like their complementary defense with their youngsters mixed with their old guys. They got obviously James Harrison and newly acquired Joe Hayden from the Browns. Those are some vets. And then Ryan Shazier, Artie Burns, and T.J. Waters, some young guys that will kind of continue to lead that defense in a good direction. So I think this team is going to be good for a while. I think my big thing with this team is I think they'll make the playoffs and I think they'll win this division. But if they want to be a Super Bowl contender, I think it's going to really rely on Big Ben, because Big Ben has shown slight signs of slowing down in the past years that may have been due to some injuries. He's definitely moving slower than he used to. I do think that that will affect them if they are trying to get to a Super Bowl, because there's still a lot of elite quarterbacks in the AFC. But they're going to be first place. I do have the Bengals still in second place. Although I just didn't think they improved. Normally if you're in second place every year, third place every year in this division, you're going to try to improve. It's the same old guys. It's Andy Dalton, A.J. Green. On defense, they still have Geno Atkins, Carlos Dunlap. They did add Kevin Minter from the Cardinals. But they still have guys like Pac-Man Jones and Vontaze Burfict, and those guys haven't changed. That may have to do with the fact that Marvin Lewis is still there. Marvin Lewis, to be honest, probably should have been fired 2 or 3 years ago, especially after that crazy playoff game where Burfict concussed Antonio Brown. I think that should have been the last straw. But they do add one interesting player in the draft, Joe Mixon, who I do think will be their future running back. I think he's going to be a great player. I think the only reason people were even down on him is because of the scandal, obviously, in the offseason. I do think he's still a great player. But, I mean, until Andy Dalton can do something in the playoffs, I don't see this team doing much in the playoffs, even if they get there, so they're not much of a team to watch. Third place is going to be the Ravens. I think they could slip into that second spot unless Flacco's injury really hinders him this season. He has that injury in the preseason. Their running back is still a question. I can't even tell you who it is. They do add Macklin at receiver. Their defense is solid. C.J. Mosley, Terrell Suggs, newly added Tony Jefferson, and Eric Weddle are still very good players. But I think that season will determine on if Joe Flacco's healthy, if they are even a good team. And then, of course, fourth place is going to be the Browns. They will get better. They will have, in my opinion, 3 or 4 wins on the season. They won't have one like they did last year. Deshaun Kaiser is going to start. I like that. Might as well start a rookie. Might as well not start one of these, vets that doesn't need to play. And then players to watch: Myles Garrett and Jabril Peppers. I actually cannot wait to see these guys play if there's any Browns games on TV. But they're going to be clearly last place in this division. But Steelers first place, Bengals second place, Ravens third place, and Browns fourth place.
Yeah, no, I do like that. I have one little change with my predictions, but I will agree with you at the top. I'm going to go with the Pittsburgh Steelers as well. The Triple Bs: Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, and Le'Veon Bell, and then you can even add Martavius Bryant into there. So quadruple Bs,
yeah.
Really. And now,
Triple Bs is now a different connotation.
It is. And but starting off with Ben Roethlisberger in the offseason, there was some talk, and he even came out and said, I'm contemplating whether I'm going to come back. He's been in the league for what is this now? 13. I mean, he's been in the league for over 10 years. And, I think with the amount of hits and the amount of injuries that he's taken, I think his body is catching up to him and is kind of saying, all right, man, you've only got a couple years left, if that. So it was a little scare for this team in the offseason, but he did come back and fully commit to this team. And how can you not with the weapons that this team has? Martavis Bryant earlier last week getting fully reinstated, which means he can now practice and play in the regular season after missing all of last season for being an idiot.
Stay off the weed.
Stay off the weed, please. Le'Veon Bell just came back to the Steelers last week after he sat out all of training camp.
This is the first time he's going to start the season.
Yeah, it is.
In a while.
In a while. He was a contract holdout and wanted a new deal. They have not been able to work anything out yet, so he signed his franchise tag, which will pay him $12 million. Not bad, but he wants the security of a long-term contract, that 4 or 5 year length, worth that 10 to 12 mark as well. So hopefully he can get that because he definitely deserves it. Antonio Brown is just, I mean, what can you say about the guy? He's one of the top 3 best receivers in the league, and even though he's not big, tall, or maybe the fastest receiver, his route running is impeccable. To me, he has some of the best route running in the league.
It's unbelievable.
And him and Ben Roethlisberger just have a connection that really can't be matched. So defensively, I do really like what this team did. They drafted T.J. Watt, the brother of J.J. Watt, in the first round, and he's actually going to be starting at outside linebacker over James Harrison. So they got some good depth there. A young guy with a veteran mix. I think they're going to be able to do really well. And one of those other, Joe Hayden. Now he was released by the Browns and was a free agent, so he could really sign with any team that he wanted, and he obviously chose the Steelers because they're a good team and they have a good chance of making the playoffs and potentially doing some damage. But one of those other situations where it's like a guy leaves one team and goes to another division rival. If I'm the Cleveland Browns, how do you let
it just doesn't make any sense.
How do you let him go for nothing? I mean, he's a 2-time Pro Bowler. Yes, he's been injured the last 2 years with foot and concussion injuries, but the guy can still play at a very high level. How do you not trade him for something, whether it's draft picks for the following year or a player in return? The fact that they just let him go, and now they have to pay him like upwards of $4 million this year, and he's not even on your team. To me, it just doesn't make sense.
Just
so
like they're also paying Osweiler.
Yes, they're paying Osweiler $16 million, and they're paying Joe Hayden, I believe, $4 million. So there's $20 million to 2 players that aren't even on your team, can't even help you win. Good job, Cleveland. I'll get to you guys in a minute. Back to the Steelers. I think that's just another benefit to this team. I think the one thing that the Steelers have lacked in the past couple of years, even though they're known for having great defenses, is their secondary turnovers. I don't think their secondary has been able to produce a lot of turnovers, and I think with Joe Hayden, I think that definitely helps them. So they're the top dog. Where I disagree with your argument is I'm going to put the Baltimore Ravens at the number 2 spot ahead of the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, there is a lot of concern with Joe Flacco in that back. He really only practiced the last week of training camp, never played in any games. But offensively, if he can stay healthy, the receiving core for this team, I think, is very good. You have Mike Wallace. They did add Jeremy Maclin. And, running back-wise is probably where they're, going to be least effective.
Yeah.
So it's really going to have to be on Joe to sling that ball around and really make plays for this team. And defensively, I think this is what this team has to hang their hat on. Like you mentioned, C.J. Mosley, Terrell Suggs. They get Tony Jefferson from the Cardinals, who is a great free safety. He can play free or strong, closer to the box. And then you have Eric Weddle, the veteran in the back end. So defensively, I think this is where this team is going to have to hang their hat on. And if for some reason they can squeak into the playoffs, I think it's going to be because of that defense, and that offense is going to have to do just enough to score. So it'll be interesting to see. For me, they're still on the bubble. I can see them coming in as that last wild card spot, or I can see them just missing it. I don't really know. It really depends on Flacco and if he can stay healthy for me. Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals, who I have in the 3rd spot. And this team is it's kind of a mixed bag, Every year when you look on paper, you see the talent that they have, the A.J. Green, the Andy Dalton. They really have a really nice running back core of Jeremy Hill, the bruiser. You have Giovanni Bernard, who's kind of like the lightning guy, catch the ball out of the backfield, quick receiving type of running back. And then they draft Joe Mixon, who can easily, in my opinion, be the number one running back for this team and carry the load. Unfortunately for him, he's still having to deal with the off-field issues of a few years ago when he was caught on video punching a woman. And it doesn't surprise me at all that this team drafted Mixon because they obviously
fits the system.
They obviously don't mind dealing with players that have issues. Vontaze Burfict and Adam Pac-Man Jones and other players of that nature. This team has been willing to take flyers on and chances on guys. And I don't disagree with that because I think, guys deserve a second chance if they have shown that they're ready to improve themselves. But it'll be interesting to see how they handle that and if they give him a workload in the beginning or if they kind of back off and say, hey, listen, we drafted you high in the second round, but that doesn't mean we're just going to hand you the job. So it'll be interesting to see with that. In the first round, they drafted John Ross, the 4.22 40-yard dash.
Fastest 40 time ever.
Ever. Drafted him number 9 overall. That was a little high for me. And I will say it because I don't believe he is a number one receiver. I think he can be a great slot receiver.
Especially not with AJ
A great complementary receiver. But to draft a guy number 9 overall, I think he needs to be a AJ Green or a Julio Jones or a Des Bryant or something in that nature, a guy who is a big physical receiver who can really be your number one guy down the road. I think John Ross will really ultimately be a slot receiving type, and I don't think he's ever going to live up to those expectations. So, for this Bengals team, I think they come in number 3, and it's really because more or less of the Steelers and the Ravens. And then lastly, the Browns, who are going to end up last in my opinion, but I don't think they're the laughing stock of the NFL anymore. I think you can hand that to the Jets. I think this Browns team is starting to make somewhat of a turn, and I do agree. I like the Deshaun Kaiser starting quarterback role. With this team, you kind of know they're not going to make the playoffs and they're still in rebuilding mode. So why not throw the kid out there and see what he can do? He did pretty well in the preseason so far. And like you mentioned, I think they finally hit on some of their first round draft picks with Myles Garrett and Jabril Peppers. I think those two are going to be the cornerstones of this defense. In the preseason, I watched a couple of the Browns games. Jabril Peppers already took back a punt return for a touchdown, and he had a really, really nice interception. So I think those guys are going to be, what this team leans on going forward. And even though they're rookies, I think they're going to be asked to do a lot this year. Unfortunately, I don't think they have enough talent anywhere else on this team to get them more than 4 or 5 wins in the season. But they're not the laughing stock anymore, I don't think, and I think they're going to be on the rise. Give this team a couple years, and they could potentially be contending for the division.
Absolutely. 3 players to watch from this division. I got just 2 players you just mentioned, Myles Garrett, Jabril Peppers. Although there's probably not going to be a lot of Browns games on TV. The ones there are, try to watch them. Because I think those guys are going to be fun to watch. And then Joe Mixon, we also talked a lot about him. That's 3 rookies to watch, but I think all those guys are going to have big impact. We're going to go to break once again because that segment went pretty long. On the other side of the break, more analysis, same stuff. We still have 5 more divisions to go. So we're going to keep on rolling here, right here on OC Rock Radio. This is the Cover 2 podcast.
All right, I'm going to take you back to a place you probably don't want to go to the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
You said you watched it 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
Why, and is that it?
And the third time was really to try and just flush it out of the system. And, I think that helped. I think it was advice that I got from some people that I was close to try and, embrace that, deal with it as quickly as possible, and then start to move on.
I think Ty Montgomery is for real, and he will be the Packers' featured satellite back for years to come, playing an important role in that offense, a high-leverage, high-volume role in that offense.
Cover 2 podcast back on OC Rock Radio as we are going to continue our NFL preview show going with the NFC North. And first, talking about the Green Bay Packers, who were 1 game away last year from making it to the Super Bowl, losing pretty handedly to the Atlanta Falcons. And, of course, in the game before, having that miraculous win over my Dallas Cowboys. Still hurts a little bit, but we're going to get over it and have a better year this year. But moving on to the Packers, really it all starts and ends with Aaron Rodgers. The guy is in my opinion, probably only behind Tom Brady, is the best quarterback in the NFL this year. And the Packers really, offensively, it's one of those other teams when you look at them on paper, they should be able to put up points whenever they want.
Absolutely.
I think the most intriguing storyline about this team this year is they lose Eddie Lacy, who is now a Seattle Seahawk, and they move Ty Montgomery full-time to the running back position. Ty Montgomery was drafted out of Stanford, and his first 2 years in the league he was a receiver, and he helped on special teams with punt returns and kick returns. And this offseason, he bulked up and really looks more like a running back. He's going to be doing a lot of running in between the tackles, and you need to have a little more beef on you than you do as a normal receiver. So this offseason, he kind of was in the gym a lot, eating a lot more, getting his body more prepared to take on a 16-game season as a running back. So we'll see how he does. The Packers do have a good offensive line, so I think he'll be able to do fine. And the fact that you do have Aaron Rodgers and those receiving threats of Devontae Adams, Randall Cobb, Jordy Nelson, teams aren't going to be able to sack the box. So I think Montgomery is going to be able to do really well in this offense and, get close to, if not that 1,000-yard mark for this offensive team. Defensively is where I think this team has struggled in the past couple of years, definitely in the secondary. And I almost feel bad for them because it just seems like every year they lose guys to injuries at the cornerback and safety position. HaHa Clinton-Dix has probably been their most reliable secondary player as that free safety. And I think he's one of the better free safeties in the league. But at their corner position, the last few years, they've drafted high in the first and second round, these cornerbacks, and guys just haven't been able to stay healthy. They've really had to go, dig way deep into their depth to have guys that are really fourth and fifth stringers that are starting because of bad secondary play. So if this defense and secondary specifically can stay healthy, then I think this Packers team, has a chance to make it back to the Super Bowl. I'm talking about them first because I'm going to pick them to win the division again. I think the only other team in this division that even has a chance of competing with the Packers is the Minnesota Vikings, who I'll move into now. Sam Bradford starting his second full season with his team, really his first offseason. If you remember last offseason, Teddy Bridgewater had that horrific knee injury to which he's still dealing with. He's going to be on the PUP list, which is the physically unable to perform list.
The PUP list?
The PUP list. Fortunately for Teddy Bridgewater, all signs are pointing up. And so far, he's done really well in his rehab. He hasn't had a lot of setbacks. He's just not there, ready to play yet. And Sam Bradford now has had one full offseason to be in this offense. Really, I think the bright spot, or hopefully the bright spot for this team is going to be Dalvin Cook, their first pick in the draft this past year out of Florida State. To me, he kind of reminds me a little bit of LaShawn McCoy. Now, I don't want to, say he's the same player. I just think he reminds me of him because of what he can do. He can run the ball out of the backfield very well, but he's also a big receiving threat. And I think that's something that this team has been missing the last couple of years. Obviously, you've had Adrian Peterson for the last, decade, and he's been the bell cow. But I don't think Adrian Peterson is as much of a receiving threat as Dalvin Cook is, so I think that's another offensive weapon that this team has. They have Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, Laquan Treadwell, who was their number one draft pick last year at receiver. I don't think has lived up to the hype at all. He's really more of a red zone threat and a big, tall receiver, like an Alshon Jeffrey in a sense.
Yes.
He's definitely not a speed guy, and he's really not going to get a whole lot of separation. But I think they need to find ways to get him more involved, especially in the red zone, to take some pressure off of that offense. You have Kyle Rudolph at tight end, who's a very, very solid tight end. But I think this is a big year for Treadwell, being the number one receiver or the number one draft pick last year. You have a lot of expectations on you. And in today's NFL, it stands for not for long. So, you're even if you're a first-round draft pick, you have a short leash, and you don't really, you're not going to have a whole lot of time to impress. So this is a big year for him. Defensively, Coach Mike Zimmer, that's what he hangs his hat on. This defensive team is very, very good in my opinion. Very stout up front. Their linebacking core is one of the best linebacking cores in the league in my opinion. And in their secondary, they signed Xavier Rhodes to that huge 5-year, I think it was it 60 million or 80 million?
I'm not sure, but it was big.
They signed him to a huge contract extension this offseason. So they still have Trey Waynes, Harrison Smith, who's one of the best safeties in the league. So this defense is where this team, really wins games. Offensively, we'll see if they can put up the points to compete. But defensively, I think they're definitely there. Moving on to the third team, in this division, the team that I think is going to be third, the Detroit Lions. And I want to talk about contract extensions.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Matthew Stafford, who we briefly touched on earlier, signing that 5-year, $135 million extension. And I'm not saying he's not deserving of it for his play on the field, but it's just the fact that $135 million, highest paid player, not even quarterback, highest paid player ever, ahead of Tom Brady, ahead of Aaron Rodgers, ahead of Eli Manning, who have all won Super Bowls. And Matthew Stafford hasn't even won a playoff game. So
he's won one road game.
And he's only won one road game in his entire career. In his 9-year
I guess
career.
they're paying him for his home record, I guess.
Is it his upside? I don't know.
His road record should be getting paid $100,000.
He should.
Right?
It's pretty ridiculous. So, he not to say that, he when he first came into the league, he signed a $50 million contract. So he's got the money. He's been paid before. But the expectations now is, listen, man, you got to produce. They made it to the playoffs last year at 9-7 as the wild card, lost to the Seahawks in the first round. So that was, it's a good start getting to the playoffs. But now you have to get there and win. And for this Detroit Lions team, who has never won a Super Bowl in their franchise history, I'm pretty sure they're tired of these losing ways.
Yeah.
And even getting to the playoffs is not good enough anymore. The talent that this team has, they need to win. They did lose Anquan Bolden, who they only had for 1 year, but he was a very good possession receiver and a guy who took some slack away from their other receiver. Why am I forgetting his name? Blanking on his name. Golden Tate. Thank you.
Yeah.
Who took some slack off of Golden Tate and was able to give Golden Tate some one-on-one matchups. So offensively, it's going to be on Stafford's shoulders, and he's going to really have to put up points for this team. Defensively, they did draft Jared Davis, the linebacker in the first round, and he showed a lot of good flashes in the preseason. So that's something to be proud of. They have Darius Slay, who's one of the better corners in the league. But other than that, this defense hasn't been able to stop a lot of opponents, and especially when you're going up against Aaron Rodgers twice a year, that's pretty tough to handle. So I think because of the division that they're in and the fact that the Packers and the Vikings, in my opinion, are better, is the reason why I'm putting the Lions number 3. And number 4 comes the Chicago Bears, who not as bad as the Jets, but I think they're one of those teams. They're only going to have 4, maybe 5 wins this season. Mm-hmm. They do draft Mitchell Trubisky. That was one of the biggest surprises from this last NFL draft. And it was interesting too because they did, before the NFL draft, they signed Mike Glennon, formerly of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, to a 3-year, $45 million contract.
Yeah,
undeserved. But when they signed him to that contract, it was like, all right, he's going to be the starter. And then you draft Mitchell Trubisky, number 2 overall. So it's like,
and you have Mike Glenn at your team party too, with all the fans.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, what's
nice
going
job,
on here?
Bears.
I mean, listen, I understand you want to draft Trubisky for the future, but in my opinion, I watched a couple of these Bears preseason games. Trubisky looked like the better quarterback. So I don't know what their official depth chart looks like yet because that hasn't been released. But I would not be surprised if they throw Trubisky out there and let him play. Again, I think it's one of those situations just like with the Cleveland Browns to where you kind of know necessarily that you're not going to make the playoffs and you're not going to have that competitive of a team. So why not put your rookie out there and see what he can do? If he impresses, great. You guys, look like geniuses. If he doesn't do that well, then you can hang it on him only being a rookie, and you're still going to give him time. So they lose Alshon Jeffrey, who's now with the Philadelphia Eagles. They brought in Victor Cruz for kind of a tryout situation. That didn't work out. He just recently got released. I think Jordan Howard is really the mainstay for this team and the bell cow, the guy that's going to really take you're going to have to do a lot of the work for this offense. Defensively, John Fox coming in on his third year with the Chicago Bears. And this is where they have not really played well at all. Their defense hasn't been able to stop anyone. The Bears, for the last, I want to say 10, 15 years, were a 4-3 defense, which means they have 4 defensive linemen and 3 linebackers. And John Fox came in and moved them to a 3-4. So it's a lot more versatile, a lot more mixing and matching. And I think in the first 2 years, they didn't necessarily have the personnel to do that. And I think going on to this third year, hopefully they can get more of the right players to fit that system because the defense is definitely going to have to help out, knowing that the offense isn't as prolific or able to put up the points. So once again, to recap, I've got the Packers winning the division. I can see the Vikings potentially getting in as a wild card, but being the number 2 team. And then I've got the Detroit Lions and the Chicago Bears. And Nick, I'll let you take over.
Well, you kind of took a lot of what I was going to say.
Sorry,
it's fine. It just means we're on the same page. I do have Packers, Vikings, Detroit, and the Bears as well. I'll extend on why because I think there might be a little bit of differences. I do want to say some stuff. Any team with Aaron Rodgers is going to have a chance at a Super Bowl, especially with that. I put the usual suspects at receiver. You got Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, and Devontae Adams. Those guys are great. They also add Martellus Bennett. Ty Montgomery, I think, will be a solid running back for them. I think anybody with Aaron Rodgers, with your quarterback, you're going to probably get some yards too. Defense is also filled with studs. So this team could be a Super Bowl team. This team could very well win the Super Bowl this year. It just all depends on how Aaron Rodgers plays in the big games, and he has played well. They just for some reason have been able to figure it out in those second round playoff games. Their first round matchups the last 2 years. They were very close, and it came down to Hail Marys and stuff like that. But it's those second round playoff games that have kind of stuck them. They're not able to get to the Super Bowl. But I think they'll clearly be first. The Vikings, they're another good team. They lose AP, but they get Dalvin Cook. That's a switch from an older guy at the end of his career to a younger guy at the beginning of his career. I always like when that kind of stuff happens. I think he'll be a great player. I did also mention this is Bradford's second year, so he should do better. But my thing is their defense. Oh, my God. Everson Griffin, Linval Joseph, Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, Harrison Rhodes, and Harrison Smith, and Xavier Rhodes. And Xavier Rhodes, in my opinion, is the third best corner in the league behind Richard Sherman and Patrick Peterson.
Wow, that's pretty big.
Yeah, no, I think he's a very good player. He definitely earned that contract. I was happy for him to get paid. The one thing I'd say about the Vikings is very good team with a average quarterback because I think Sam Bradford is not an elite quarterback, and I do believe he's going to have to go up and above what he's done in the past to get this team or to the play. I won't say they won't make the playoffs, but I will say that they're not going to advance any further than they usually have if Sam Bradford doesn't play up and above than he has in the past. So I do think they're second. I do think they have a chance to make the playoffs. Detroit comes down to one thing. Matthew Stafford. He is the clear reason why anything will happen with this team. I think if he plays well, they'll be okay, and they will have a chance at the playoffs if he does play really well. But if he plays bad, they have no chance, and they're not going to be very good. This team is kind of filled. They don't have a lot of stars on this team besides Matthew Stafford, especially since Calvin Johnson retired. So this is, their one star is Matthew Stafford. They remind me a lot of the Indianapolis Colts, who I'll talk about in obviously a little later. Just with their kind of quarterback has to determine whether they do any good. So it's all up to Matthew Stafford for Detroit. And Chicago, I echo you on the 4 or 5 wins. Glennon's the starter. I have to disagree slightly. I do think Glennon was the better guy. I do think Trubisky played better because he played in kind of a normal system, because obviously when you're in the preseason, you're not showing all your stuff. And I think Trubisky, they gave him some plays to play with to make him look good. I do think Glennon's the guy. Obviously, if he plays bad, Trubisky could slip in there, but I do think Glennon was the good choice. Jordan Cloud's a stud. I think he's clearly their best player, especially with Cameron Meredith out for the season with a torn ACL. I think Jordan Howard will be a fun player to watch for them, but this is one of the worst teams in the NFL, and I'm not going to extend too much on that any further. My 2 players to watch in this conference, Jordan Howard, who I just mentioned, another bad team or another good player on a bad team. So if the Bears are on TV, make sure to watch Jordan Howard, and also Xavier Rhodes, because I do think people underrate him a little bit. Watch Xavier Rhodes, especially in those games where he's covering a number 1 receiver, because he's going to get that Patrick Peterson Sherman treatment where they don't throw over to him. So he is a very good player. I want people to see him, and I think he'll do good. So that's the NFC North. Just to recap, just like Jared, Packers, Vikings, Detroit, and Bears in that order. Moved on to the NFC South. This conference is led by the Atlanta Falcons, who were in the essentially won the Super Bowl last year, barring that huge comeback. They obviously had enough to win the Super Bowl last year. They didn't make too many changes, and I think they could be right back in that picture again if they just play similar to what they did last year. They have so many offensive weapons. When you have Julio Jones and Devontae Parker and Tevin Coleman and a ton of host of receivers, their defense is solid. They got a lot of young guys on their defense. Deion Jones, Desmond Trufant, good players to watch for. Their O-line is stellar. They also add Takaris McKinley and Dontari Poe on their D-line. So I think they're going to be right there. They're going to be a playoff team. They're going to be very good, and I think they'll lead the NFC South. Moving on to second place. Now, this is where it got hard. There's a lot of these teams. This could fluctuate between these second and fourth teams a lot. I do think the Falcons will win the division, but as far as the rest of these, I do have the Panthers being second because I do think Cam Newton's going to come back. Cam Newton's going to have a good year again, especially they add Christian McCaffrey along with Jonathan Stewart. That's a good running back tandem. The defense is getting older, and that's not necessarily a good thing, but it's still good enough. I don't think they have too many years on them in the future as far as guys like Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis. But they have enough younger guys, and those guys are still good enough to be solid players. But I do think this has a lot to do with Cam Newton. If Cam Newton is injured and has concussion issues and stuff like that and is complaining about getting hit and stuff like that, I think they might have a similar year that they did last year. But as far as I'm concerned, I think they're going to improve. I think they're going to be second place. Third place, have the Bucs. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They added Deshaun Jackson on offense. That's another asset for Jameis Winston. It's hard for me to predict what Jameis Winston's going to do this year because he had a good rookie year. He had a good sophomore year. You're kind of waiting for that sophomore slump. I think that's when this might happen. I think that's why they're going to be third place instead of second place. Defense is still filled with some good players. Gerald McCoy, Levante David, Brent Grimes, and that newly added TJ Ward are all solid players. But I think this team's middle of the road. They're probably going to be 8-8. 9-7, something like that. It depends on what Jameis does, and I don't think Jameis will play too well. I don't think they'll be at that 10-11 win count. I think their defense will definitely hold them in some games. And last, I do think they're going to be very similar to the Bucs. I don't think they're going to be a bad team, but they are going to be last in this division. The Saints, when you look at their roster, you think AP and Drew Brees, and you probably think, oh, wow, the offense is going to be really good. But other than that, they lost Brandon Cooks. Michael Thomas is going to be their number one guy, but I don't think he's a number one receiver yet. So I think they don't really have a lot of receivers. Their defense is still filled with, subpar guys. Cameron Jordan's a star, but then you got Manti Te'o, Delvin Breaux, their drafty Lattimore, and Kenny Vaccaro. Those are all like middle-of-the-road defensive players. And I do think Brees will have a good year. I just don't think this team has any chance at the playoffs. I think that offense, there's not enough on that offense this year, which is rare because usually their offense has been good. Not enough on offense, and the defense is kind of still middle of the road. So I think they're last place.
Yeah, no, kind of right back at you, man. I feel like you made a lot of great points, and I'm going to start off with the NFC defending champion Atlanta Falcons, who obviously had that horrendous loss in the Super Bowl, which we don't need to talk about anymore.
Texas A&M got them off the hook.
Texas A&M got off. They did. But no, this team is really led, offensively. Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Devontae Freeman. That's their three-headed monster. And then really, I think they have a lot of good complementary players. Coleman, the Tevin Coleman, the backup running back. You got Mohamed Sanu as their second receiver, who I think is very, very good complement to Julio Jones. And then at the tight end spot, Austin Hooper, who I think not that many people talk about. He was a rookie last year.
I like Austin Hooper.
He's a big receiver, but he can also run, and I think especially in the red zone, he's a big target for Matthew Stafford. So I think he's going to come on and have a really good year. For this defense, for Dan Quinn, I think now this is really his defense. The first couple years with this team, he wanted to get the right guys. He wanted a lot of speed on the field. This isn't necessarily a big defense as far as having big players, but they're fast. They run sideline to sideline. They're very physical. They don't let a lot of guys run against them. I'm really looking forward to watching Vic Beasley, see if he can, duplicate his season that he had last year, leading the league in sacks. They get Trufant, their number one cornerback from last year. He was out for most of the year. And then they brought over Dontari Poe from the Kansas City Chiefs, so he's going to be able to clog up the middle. And then you've got Robert Alford and Keanu Neal also in the secondary. Keanu Neal playing that Cam Chancellor role for Dan Quinn in this defense. So I think this team, because of the talent and the weapons that they have, I think they will continue to lead this division, and not easily, because this next team I'm about to talk about I think is on the rise again. But I for right now, I will give the Atlanta Falcons this division. Coming in at a somewhat close second is the Carolina Panthers. And mainly it's because I agree. I think Cam Newton is going to have somewhat of a bounce back season, even though he didn't really play in all but one preseason game this year because of shoulder surgery that he had in the offseason. They wanted to make sure that he was completely healthy for the regular season, so he hasn't really gotten a whole lot of snaps. A lot of people are saying he's going to be rusty, but I think with the offensive weapons that they drafted, I think he's going to be just fine. You still have Kelvin Benjamin, and you've got a good solid core of running backs. But then you go out and you draft Christian McCaffrey, who so far in this preseason has looked spectacular. The guy can run in between the tackles. He can run outside. He's quicker than fast, and he's one of the he hasn't played it down in the NFL yet, but I think he's already one of the better receiving threats as a running back in the league. You give him an option route, which means he comes out of the backfield and he chooses which way he goes. He's going to beat the defender, whether it's a linebacker or a safety, every single time.
If you didn't see him play in college, just look at the game in the Rose Bowl where they played Iowa.
Yeah.
The guy dominated.
He dominates. And like I said, he's going to be able to do it. He's going to average receiving and running over 100 yards a game, in my opinion. And they also draft Curtis Samuel, who is another McCaffrey type out of Ohio State. Now, he's more of strictly a receiver, but you can also run some gadget plays, put him in the backfield, line him up in the slot. So they're going to be able to do run a lot of different formations with all of these guys that they have. You have the small guys with McCaffrey and Curtis Samuel, and then you've got the big threats of Kelvin Benjamin, and you can't even forget about their tight end.
Greg Olsen.
Greg Olsen, thank you. You can't even forget about him. So offensively, this team, it looks to be stacked, and I can see them putting up, upwards of 30 points a game if Cam Newton can stay healthy. Defensively is where they've, kind of taken a step back a little bit. I think their front seven is still very solid, meaning their defensive line and their linebackers. It's their secondary that is still, in my opinion, very young. So I think they have talent there, but it's just they're very young and they're not as experienced. So I think that's kind of where they could struggle. If I'm an opponent, that's going to be where I'm attacking, not necessarily with a running game. I'm going to attack that secondary and see if I can beat him that way. So I don't see Carolina making the playoffs this year, but I do see them improving on their horrific record from last year. 2015, going from the Super Bowl to last year being one of the worst teams in the league, I don't see that happening again. I see them definitely bouncing back and making a little bit of noise in this division. Moving on to the third team, I do agree with you pretty much with all four. Third team, I think, will be the Buccaneers. And this is Jameis Winston's team. This is his third year in the league now. And if you've watched Hard Knocks on HBO, he's one of the better leaders in this team. I mean, he has no problem with being vocal and telling players how it is, but he also doesn't mind taking criticism and saying, hey, listen, this is, if I make a mistake, it's on me. I want guys to come and be accountable. The problem with Winston, I think, is that I think he's a gunslinger. So there's going to be games and there's going to be times where he makes that spectacular play or he gets out of a sack and runs around and throws a 50-yard bomb for a touchdown.
Yeah.
But I think he's also going to have some down plays where, he's going to have a game where he has 3 interceptions or potentially 4 interceptions and he costs his team the win. He's going to take a lot of risks and it's a risk-reward thing. So I agree they could be an 8-8, 7-9 win team, but I don't see them winning this division or even making the playoffs. Defensively, they got TJ Ward, who was released by the Broncos last week, and I think that's a big pickup in their secondary. You mentioned Brent Grimes and Vernon Hargraves, who are 2 solid cornerbacks, smaller cornerbacks, but still very good. But their safeties, they really didn't have any legitimate safeties, in my opinion. So bringing on TJ Ward, I think that solidifies that back end a little bit. They have Quan Alexander, Levante David, Gerald McCoy. So that defense is pretty good. And then I haven't even talked about offensively, going back to their offense, Mike Evans and Deshaun Jackson.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like on paper, this team could look very good. But I think when they get out on the field, I don't think they're going to be able to put it all together. I think with a combination of Jameis Winston making too many mistakes and then the safety play not being well enough, I see the team finishing third. And then to round it out, the New Orleans Saints, who, I literally almost am going to echo what you say. You look at this team and you say Drew Brees, Adrian Peterson, and who else? You have
exactly.
You have Jordan Cameron as their defensive end. Cameron Jordan, I'm sorry, is their defensive end. And really, that's the only threat I see them having on defense. Like you mentioned, they lose Brandon Cooks, who was a big receiving threat for Drew Brees, and I think that's going to be a bigger loss.
Willie
than most,
Snead also suspended for a couple
and yes,
games.
and Willie Snead suspended. So I think that's going to be a bigger loss losing Brandon Cooks than most people think. And yeah, I don't see the Saints team having enough firepower or enough weapons. I think the most controversial thing that happened with this team this offseason was their cornerback. I think it was, how do we pronounce his name?
Delvin Breaux.
Delvin Breaux. Yeah. He was injured in training camp. And originally the doctors or the training staff diagnosed his injury as season ending. They went back and had a second opinion, and it turns out he's only going to be out 4 to 6 weeks.
What is that?
Those two trainers that diagnosed that are now fired. Just a very kind of an interesting
sketchy
topic.
Saints.
Yeah, sketchy Saints. So, I mean, it's great for him because he'll hopefully be able to come back sooner than expected. But just kind of an interesting, thing that happened with the Saints this offseason to where they had a misdiagnosis and the team said, all right, you trainers are gone. So, this team is going to end up last. So, once again, Falcons win the division. Panthers just missing the playoffs. And then you got Tampa Bay, the third team looking outside, and the Saints in the rear.
That should be a funner division to watch than last season.
Yeah, the thing with that division, they always put up points. It's defensively, can those teams make stops?
Exactly. So I want to actually start. Let's give our first place team for the AFC South each, and then we'll go to break. We do have a little bit of time to talk about just the beginning of the AFC South. I'll start mine. My first place team is going to be the Tennessee Titans, a team that hasn't been up there in a while. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I do think this is Mariota's time to shine. I call him somewhat elite so far. I do think he's a little better and a little more on course to be a better quarterback than Jameis Winston is, in my opinion. I do think they're two-headed monster at running back with DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry. Is a solid one. I think that's dangerous. That helps Mariota out. Also, Mariota can run. The receiving core, they added Eric Decker and Corey Davis. Corey Davis was a draft pick out of was it Wyoming or was it Western Michigan?
Western Michigan.
Yeah. And then they have Delaney Walker. So they have a lot of offensive tools for Mariota to work with. The O-line is also getting better. It's better than it has been. And the defense is led by Jarrell Casey and Logan Ryan. Logan Ryan coming from the New England Patriots. He's a good corner. They obviously didn't need him anymore because they got Stephon Gilmore. And I'm also interested to see what Adoree Jackson does on this team. I feel like he'll do a lot on special teams, but I want to see if he plays a little offense and defense as well this season. But this division is tough to pick. But if I had to pick a team, I'm picking the Titans. I think Mariota will put them over that trying to find the word for the hump. Yeah, exactly. Put them over the hump, and I think they'll have 10 wins this season. I think that they're the first place team.
I think the Titans this year, I don't want to disagree with you because I think they're one of the, not sleeper picks, but one of the hot teams that a lot of people are picking. Even in fantasy, Marcus Mariota is one of the hottest
off the charts.
Yeah, hottest quarterbacks being drafted in fantasy. So, this team has a lot of upside. I'm still going to go with the Houston Texans to win the division, and it's mainly because of their defense. You have J.J. Watt returning, seems to be very healthy. I mean, really all over the field, this team has playmakers. You got J.J. Watt, and then you have Jadeveon Clowney, Whitney Merciless, Brian Cushing as your outside linebackers. And then your secondary, Kevin Johnson, who they drafted a few years ago, and then Joseph, who has been a veteran in this league for multiple years. So I think because of this defense, I think that's the reason why this team still wins. Offensively, you have DeAndre Hopkins, who signed another mega extension this offseason. A lot of guys signing contract extensions this season, which well deserved. Unfortunately, they did lose Will Fuller for he's going to be out for a significant amount of time with a shoulder injury. And then I'm really interested to see at one point in the season does Deshaun Watson get a chance to start. I don't think it's going to be right away. I think right now this is Tom Savage's team, but if offensively if they're not producing like they should. With the weapons that this team has, I think he's on a very short leash. If I'm Bill O'Brien, I'm only giving him 2 to 3 games. And if he can't produce in those games, I'm immediately going to Deshaun Watson because I don't want to lose this season. I think this team has too much talent, and they're not just going to stick with one guy. They're not the Cleveland Browns or the New York Jets. This team has way too much talent, in my opinion. So Tom Savage, you are on a short leash, buddy, because the way that Deshaun Watson played in the preseason, I think he definitely deserves an opportunity to play at some point during this regular season.
Absolutely. Now, so that's interesting. We'll talk about the rest of the AFC South after this quick break. We'll give our rest of our 3 teams, and then we'll talk a little bit of some of the Western teams too as well. So we'll be right back on the Cover 2 podcast.
Well, I mean, you know, it's always been something to being from Oakland that, you know, you want to play at home and have the opportunity. And I mean, you know, maybe them staying probably wouldn't have been so big for me to want to come and play, but knowing that they was leaving, and you know, a lot of the kids here probably won't have an opportunity to see, you know, most of they idols growing up being a hometown no more. With me being from here and, you know, continuing to, you know, to be here, it gives them an opportunity that, you know, they get to see somebody that actually did it.
Yeah, early on it's going to be Tom Savage because he's been in that system, and we all, you know, we talk to people, they talk about how complicated that offense is. Deshaun Watson has a learning curve, but I think at some point we're going to see Deshaun Watson.
I do too.
Either because Savage is hurt or he's ineffective. All we heard coming out of the mini camps was how well Watson worked, how well he performed. The receiver spoke glowingly of him, and as we know, if your receivers speak well of you, that tends to bode well.
I'm just curious if Adoree Jackson's not the most important offseason addition for them. If you look at how they ranked offensively and defensively last season, and really the big thing that stands out is how poor they were in the passing game. And if, you know, Marcus Mariota continues to progress as a quarterback, as I don't think there's any reason not to think he would, then you think this is a half full kind of team.
Cover 2 podcast live on OC Rock Radio. I'm Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
We are coming down. We have 3 more divisions to go. We, on the other side of the break, we told you who we thought was going to win the AFC South. We actually disagreed for the first time in 2 divisions. And so I'll continue. I did have the Titans being in first place. Continuing on to the second place team, I had Jared's first place team, the Houston Texans, coming in. And this is not second place is in. The Titans are going to be 13-3, and the Texans are going to be 10-6. I think they're going to be around 9-7. I think they could even potentially win this division, but I can't confidently say that with Tom Savage as the starting quarterback. It's hard for me to give them the nod. I think last year was a little bit of a fake playoff run. Obviously, the Raiders were playing essentially nobody at quarterback, and you know, it was Connor Cook. And they had no chance of winning that game with him at quarterback, so I think the Texans got to the second round a little easier. This team still has a super dominant defense, and that's what will get them most of these wins. I mean, J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney, those are 2 of the best defensive ends in the league, and they're on the same team. It's ridiculous. They also have Brian Cushing and Jonathan Joseph as well on that defense. A big thing for me, along with the quarterbacks, is the fact that Dwayne Brown hasn't reported yet. He's holding out a lot like Le'Veon Bell and Aaron Donald has. Le'Veon Bell came back to his team. We'll talk about Donald in a second when we start talking about the Rams. But he hasn't shown up, and that's a tackle, and that's a guy that's supposed to protect the quarterback. And if you don't have that much of a stud on your line, he's just not there. It's going to be tough for these first couple games as long as he's not there, and that may have been a reason why they may have picked Tom Savage, because they didn't want Deshaun Watson kind of getting discouraged and getting sacked a bunch.
That's a good point.
But I do expect eventually Deshaun Watson to play this season. I think this will be a little bit of the Case Keenum, Jared Goff thing, but I think will work out this time. I think you start Tom Savage because he's more familiar with the system and he's a veteran guy, and then you bring in Deshaun Watson once Tom Savage starts to show a little bit of a deterioration. But yeah, this will kind of determine on if the quarterbacks can play well, because the defense will show up. I think this is an 8 to 10 win team. I think they will have a chance in this division just because this division doesn't have a star team. I picked the Titans because I think Mariota will put them over the hump, but Texans are a close second place. Third place is Colts. I got Andrew Luck, Andrew Luck and the Colts. Andrew Luck needs to stay healthy. That's the biggest thing. I mentioned them earlier. It's a lot like the Detroit Lions. Not a lot of stars on this team besides Andrew Luck. He's clearly the best player. I know you have receivers like T.Y. Hilton, and you have defensive players like Vontae Davis, but this team is going to determine on if Andrew Luck's healthy and if Andrew Luck produces. Because if he doesn't produce, I'm telling you, they're not going to be good, just like they were last year. So that's why I have them in third place. I can't put them above the Texans or Titans because they just don't know have enough on the roster around Andrew Luck. And that line is still very suspect. Fourth place, I got the Jags. They're fourth place because I don't really know what they're going to do this season. They have a very good young roster, especially on defense. I mean, some of these players I'm about to name, it's ridiculous. They've never succeeded. Their biggest problem is just that Blake Bortles is their quarterback, and he really shouldn't be a starter in the NFL. He's one of those guys, and we were just talking about this a little bit in the break, the Colin Kaepernick situation with quarterbacks. Colin Kaepernick could have played for the Jags. I mean, he's better than Blake Bortles. So that's going to be the main reason why they're probably not good. But just listen to these defensive players. You have young players and vets. You have Dante Fowler Jr., Jalen Ramsey, and Miles Jack. They're young players to watch. And then they got vets. They got Pelesny, Barry Church from the Cowboys, Calais Campbell, and Malik Jackson. I mean, those are four great defensive players. So I expect this team to compete, but just with Blake Bortles at quarterback, I can't put them any higher than last place because the guy is an interception machine, and he just has not performed up to the standard. I do like Leonard Fournette, a running back too. I do think he won't be as good as people think he'll be, but he'll be good enough and he'll help that offense. But I do think the Jags will be last place.
Yeah, I think this is probably the one division where we disagree on a lot. So
absolutely, there we go.
I'm my division winner was the Houston Texans. Secondly, I'm going with the Tennessee Titans, and I do have to agree that this team is definitely on the rise. Mariota, again, I think this year they're going to really open up the playbook. Obviously, he's shown in his first 2 years that he can be a dual threat guy, a running guy. I think this year they're really going to let him throw the ball around a little more and show what he can do as a pure quarterback with his arm. They've got that thunder and thunder again with DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry, and so far it's worked. This team, they want to be a run-first team. They have a really good offensive line, and if that offensive line can stay healthy, then DeMarco Murray and Henry are just only going to they're going to see results from that. You have Rashard Matthews at one receiver. You have Delaney Walker at tight end. And then, like we mentioned, they draft Corey Davis from Western Michigan, a really big, tall, kind of bulky receiver, but he can also run as well. So he's not just a red zone threat. I think he can be a guy that can, has potential breakaway speed. So offensively, looking at this team, they are very, very stacked. And I think they can make some noise. Defensively, I think they're a little under the radar. I think they don't get as much credit for their defense as they should, especially up front. Jarrell Casey, who just got signed another extension, another guy that got an extension this offseason, I think he is probably one of the most underrated players in the NFL.
One of the best defensive tackles.
Because he's from USC originally, out of college. But because he plays for the Titans and because the Titans just don't get as much publicity as other teams do, I think that's the only reason why this guy doesn't get looked at. If he were playing on the Patriots or the Cowboys or another team that gets on TV more, this guy would be an absolute stud. He would be in commercials and have all these other endorsements and stuff. This guy is no joke. Look out for him. Their linebacking core is really good as well. Wesley Woodyard, Brian Orakpo, who came over from the Redskins a few years ago. In the secondary, I think that's maybe where they struggle a little bit. They signed Logan Ryan, who is with the Patriots the last couple years. Jonathan Cyprien from the Jaguars. And then, of course, drafting Adoree Jackson in the second round, who I agree, I think initially will kind of do more damage in the special teams part, more of as a returner. And I think as the season goes on and going into his second year next year, he will really start to develop more as a cornerback. He's a smaller corner, a guy that can play in the slot and on the outside. But I think really he's going to make a big impact right away on special teams. He already took back a punt return for a touchdown in the preseason, so he's already shown what he can do, definitely. Moving on to my third team, I disagree with your rankings again. I actually have the Jaguars in the number 3 spot.
I love it. We mixed up the whole thing. Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because of all those defensive players that you mentioned. I do agree that I don't think Blake Bortles is the guy. I also don't think Henny is the guy.
No way.
I'm going to put this team third because I'm not going to say that this is a sleeper team that is gonna make the playoffs.
We did that last year.
We did that last year, and I even did that the previous year to that. So I'm not gonna say that again. But
now they're gonna make the playoffs.
I know they probably will, just because we didn't say it. But looking at their defense, like you had mentioned, the amount of talent that this team has and even their depth, starting up front with Malik Jackson and Calais Campbell and Bennett, and then you have Dante Fowler Jr., who isn't even listed as the starter. He's coming off the bench. And then your linebacking core.
Yeah, Telvin Smith. Oh, man.
Telvin Smith, who is a sideline-to-sideline freak. And you, of course, have Miles Jack. Those guys are like the same players. You're not going to run on them. And then you have, on first and second down, you have Paul Plesnusny, who is just a beast. Yeah, on first down, if you want to run the ball, good luck, because he will stuff almost anyone. And then going into their secondary, Jalen Ramsey, who really showed out, a really, really good corner. They got A.J. Boye from the Houston Texans, took him from one of their rivals, gave him a big contract, and then they signed Barry Church from the Cowboys. So defensively, this team is loaded. Moving on to their offense, that's obviously where they struggle the most, and it's because of the lack of quarterback play. I do agree that I don't think Fournette is going to, potentially live up to the hype this year, being the number 4 overall pick, and I think that's mainly because of who a lot of people are comparing him to, and that would be Adrian Peterson. They have the same type of running styles, the same bodies, so I don't think he's going to be that bruiser that Peterson is, but I do think he will be somewhat productive. On the outside, you've got Marquise Lee, you have Allen Hurns, Allen Robinson, D.D. Westbrook, who's looked really good.
Looked really good. Yeah,
he's going to be a deep threat, take the top off of a defense type of receiver. So, and then I think offensively they have the weapons around their quarterback. They just don't have a quarterback that can necessarily get them the ball. But I put this team third because of the players that they do have, and the reason why I have the Colts last is because, to me, the Colts are one of those teams to where it's Andrew Luck or nothing.
That's what, exactly.
And I literally don't think they have talent around them at all. Scott Tolzien is going to be their starter, and that's not a good thing to open up the season because Andrew Luck isn't healthy enough. And so because we don't know when Andrew Luck is coming back, I see this team as being the third worst team in the league. I have the Jets, the Bears, and then the Colts. Rounding out that top 3 as worst in the league. So this team, I don't think they have enough talent at all. I like what they did in the draft by drafting Malik Hooker, the free safety out of Ohio State. He is still injured. And then in the second round, they took Quincy Wilson, the cornerback from Florida. So actually their first 3 picks in the draft were on defense. So I understand them trying to work defensively to get better, but I don't see them having enough firepower at all. I mean, T.Y. Hilton is definitely their best offensive weapon after Andrew Luck, but Scott Tolzien, I don't see him being able to get. If I'm a defensive coordinator going up against the Indianapolis Colts, regardless of whether if Andrew Luck is playing or not, I'm double teaming T.Y. Hilton all day, and I'm saying you can beat me with one of your other players. Go ahead. If I lose to you because your other backup guys beat me, I can live with that. But I'm not going to let T.Y. Hilton beat me. And that's really the only guy I think they need to scheme for. So going back to my top 4, I have the Houston Texans winning the division. And then I've got the Tennessee Titans, Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Colts rounding it out.
Yeah, just to reiterate mine, because we were so different. Mine was Titans, Texans, Colts, and Jaguars. So we actually mixed up the entire thing. That should be an interesting division, just because I don't really think, although the Titans I do think are going to be in first place, I don't think any of those teams are going to win more than 10 games.
No.
So
they never really do.
That should be interesting to watch. Moving on, we're going to move on to the AFC West. There is a team in a new city this year in this division, but they're not going to be in first place. So I just want to say that,
yeah. Nice little tease.
The team that I believe is going to be in first place is a team that is going to be moving in the future to another city. That is the Oakland Raiders. The Oakland Raiders were a fantastic team last year. Don't look at what happened in the playoffs. That is based on injuries to Derek Carr. I still think this team is very good. Their offensive line is great. They have defensive stars like Bruce Irvin and Khalil Mack and a host of good DBs. Derek Carr, like I mentioned, was potentially an MVP candidate last year. Could be the MVP this year. I think this team is very good. And I think they're going to be first place team. I think because they have a similar team as last year, and they added Marshawn Lynch, who I don't think is going to be as good as people think he is. I think he's going to be a little rusty. I don't think he's going to be that good. I think he'll help, and him being from Oakland and stuff like that, that will make him play good enough. But I think he'll be rusty. You take a year off the NFL, that's tough. But this all has to do with Carr's health, because we saw what happened last year. I mean, if Derek Carr gets injured again, this team is kind of screwed, because we see what they have behind him, Matt McGloin and Connor Carr. So, this team is based on Derek Carr's health. But I do think they're first place, because I'm not going to judge a team on a quarterback getting hurt. So the Raiders are in first place. A close second, though, is the Kansas City Chiefs. Although they've lost some offensive weapons, they lost Jamal Charles to the Broncos. They lost Spencer Ware to an injury, and they lost Jeremy Maclin to the Baltimore Ravens. This offense is still solid. They have Tyreek Hill, rookie Kareem Hunt going to be the running back, taking over for Spencer Ware, and Travis Kelce also on offense. It's still a solid offense, and this defense is still one of the best in the league. The linebacker core is great with D Ford and Justin Houston, and then for DBs you have Eric Berry, one of the best safeties in the league, and Marcus Peters, who is right along with Patrick Peterson, Richard Sherman, and Xavier Rhodes. In my opinion, I think Peters is that fourth or fifth guy in the league at corner. So, anytime you got a corner that can stop literally an entire side of the field, that's big. Alex Smith should be pretty good, but he's got someone behind him this year, for once. Patrick Mahomes. I would not be surprised if the Chiefs struggle a little bit if Patrick Mahomes becomes the quarterback of the Chiefs. I don't know if a lot of people think that same thing, but I do believe that Patrick Mahomes has shown enough in the preseason. I wasn't high on him going to the Cardinals as a Cardinals fan. I wasn't high on him going to the Cardinals. I still am glad we didn't take him, just for some reasons I'll talk about later. But I do think he's worked out for the Chiefs, and I think he could be the quarterback. This team still is more than likely a playoff team, and this is one of those divisions where they got two good teams. Another solid team is the Broncos. I got them in third place. Problem is they have no quarterback. It's Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch, or Brock Osweiler. I mean, come on. They did add Jamal Charles, although he's injury prone. The defense is the only reason this team is going to be any good, unless the quarterback play really steps up. You still got Von Miller, Aqib Talib, and Brandon Marshall on defense. But again, just like a lot of the teams in this league, if this quarterback play doesn't show up, they're going to be a lot like the Colts to me, where they're just a team that ends up being 6-10 because their quarterbacks didn't show up. But they're third place. And fourth place, the only reason I put the Chargers below the Broncos is I do think that defense will get them a couple wins, and the Chargers have a tendency to lose a lot of close games. Can the wide receivers stay healthy? Because they haven't been able to the last 2 or 3 years. That's a big thing. The defense is led by Joey Bosa, Hayes Pollard. But other than that, it's a standard defense. Phillip Rivers is still a great quarterback, and Melvin Ingram's a great running back. But I don't think that's enough to make them a playoff team. But this team could surprise people if those wide receivers stay healthy. I think if the wide receivers stay healthy, they easily jump in the third spot and may as well jump in the second spot if the Chiefs' quarterback play isn't up to par. But so for the AFC West, I have the Raiders, Chiefs, Broncos, and Chargers in that order.
Yeah, for me, it was a toss-up at first.
Yeah.
The Chiefs have been a really good team the last couple of years. Other than the Patriots, I think they're actually top 3 in most wins in the last 3 years. So Andy Reid really has this team rolling. They do. They have a lot of wins. But I think what kind of sold me on giving the edge to the Raiders was the talent that they have. And I think, like you mentioned before, I think obviously the biggest offseason move was bringing in Marshawn Lynch. I can see him, getting that to that 1,000-yard mark. I think it's going to take him a couple games to get back into the flow of things. When you miss a full season, I don't care what position you play, and he could be in great shape. When you miss an entire season, it takes you a minute to get back. He didn't play a lot in the preseason. Obviously, they don't want to wear him out. They know that he's a bruising running back. He's not a guy that's going to really take a lot of passes or catch passes and make guys miss. He likes to go between the tackles. He likes to make contact. So they didn't give him a whole lot of work in the offseason. They wanted to save him for the regular season. But when you look at this team, you got Amari Cooper, Michael Crabtree on the outside, of course, Derek Carr slinging that thing. And then at tight end, you got Jared Cook, who came over from the Packers and had a really, really good second half of the season with Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball. So if Derek Carr can find Jared Cook, who is a big athletic tight end, that's just another weapon for this team to use. And then defensively, obviously Khalil Mack, the multiple-time All-Pro. You have Bruce Irvin, Lee at the linebacker spots. And then in the secondary, David Amerson. They drafted Garyon Conley, which was a little bit of a not head scratcher, but it was, one of those things where Conley, another cornerback out of Ohio State, was dealing with a domestic violence issue coming out of college. The Raiders decided to give him a chance in the second round. I believe his case is not finished yet. It's still going through the legal process. So an interesting thing to keep watch of, if he will be able to play this season or if he won't because of his legal issues. In the secondary, you have Carl Joseph, who I think is another big bruising safety. I kind of also compare him to one of those Cam Chancellor guys who he likes to come up and hit you and make his presence known. And then you have the free safety and Reggie Nelson, who's that kind of free range guy, last part of your defense. So this defense is really, really stout compared with their offense. And I think that's why they slightly, and I really mean this, slightly out-edge the Chiefs by one game, max to win the division. I think it's going to be coming down to that last 2 games of the season to see who wins that division. So at that, close second spot, I have the Kansas City Chiefs, and it's really because of the talent that they have as a team. I agree with you that Alex Smith does just enough for this team to win and make it to the playoffs. But is he a guy that you're going to count on, in the playoffs to get you over the hump?
No, that's why they drafted
and win
Mahomes
games
too.
Exactly, and even in this draft, when they traded up to draft Mahomes at number 10 overall, I think that was very, very shocking to a lot of people. Mahomes coming out of Texas Tech in a air raid offense, which means he was exclusively out of the shotgun, and they barely ran the ball. I mean, this guy was throwing the ball 50, 60 times a game like it was no one's business. I mean, his numbers were obviously off the chart, but you can't really look at that because of how many opportunities he had to throw. He's never been under center, never been in a pro offense or anything like Andy Reid's offense. So I think surprisingly, he did fairly well in the preseason for never being under center or being in a pro offense. Obviously, there's a lot that he has to learn, but I think the upside for this kid is really high. So I think they're going to stick with Alex Smith for most of the season. And I don't see Mahomes coming in unless there's an injury to Alex Smith. But the weapons that he has, Tyreek Hill, who came out of nowhere last year, really replaced Jeremy Maclin. They decided to let Jeremy Maclin go because they felt so confident in Tyreek Hill. And then at the tight end spot, you have Travis Kelce, one of the best tight ends in the league, in my opinion. Another reason why I put this team second is because of the lack of running back depth. You have Kareem Hunt, who is a rookie running back, having to start because they lost their number one running back in the third preseason game.
Yes,
Spencer Ware. So that I think is going to be a big deal for this team. Andy Reid likes to run the ball a lot. So we'll see if Kareem Hunt, the rookie, can come on. Defensively, once again, this is another really solid defensive team. You got Justin Houston and Dee Ford at the outside linebacker spots. You do lose Dontari Poe, that big clogger in the middle, that big run stuffer. But we'll see if they got Benny Logan, another big 300-plus pound defensive tackle. We'll see if he can take over that spot. And then in the secondary is really where they hang their hat. You got Eric Berry, the all-pro free safety, and then Marcus Peters, who in his first 2 years in the NFL has the most interceptions of any player. So he's a guy that he just makes constant plays for this team. So those are my top 2 teams. Number 3 comes in the Denver Broncos, and it's mainly because of their quarterback play. Defensively, they're still very good. They have Vance Joseph, who comes in as a first-year head coach. He was the Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator last year. They're going to stick with the 3-4 defense, so they're going to keep a lot of things the same, but they lose Wade Phillips. And so there's a lot of, there's going to be a lot of terminology and things like that that are going to change. But, listen, you still got Von Miller, who is obviously one of the best, if not the best, pure pass rushers in the NFL. Complete beast. Somewhat of a blow. They do lose Shane Ray for he's going to be gone for at least half of the season. So that was a big blow because with DeMarcus Ware retiring this offseason, they were expecting Shane Ray to come in and be that starting, that next guy in line. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. Brandon Marshall at that inside linebacker spot is really, really stout. Derek Wolfe at defensive end. And then in their secondary, it's still very solid with Akeem Talib, Chris Harris Jr., and Bradley Roby. An interesting fact that we talked about with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they decided to let T.J. Ward go.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting thing because T.J. Ward came out, and even some of the other Denver Broncos teammates, Aqib Talib specifically, came out and said that the way that the Broncos handled this release of TJ Ward was not, it was a little fishy. They could have handled it a little more professional. So we'll see if now Justin Simmons, the new strong safety, can come on. They must have a lot of confidence in this kid because he's going to come in and be thrown right into the fire. But overall, this defense is still very solid. Offensively, the weapons for this team are still there. When you have Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, C.J. Anderson, those weapons are there. For me, it's the offensive line and the quarterback play.
Yes.
Paxton Lynch is going to be out for the first couple of weeks, so this is really Trevor Siemian's team, and he's one of those guys that he can make some plays for you. You ask him not to lose the game. He's not going to throw it 50, 60 yards down the field, and he's not going to make those exciting plays. You just don't want him to turn the ball over. You have a really, really good defense. You have weapons on the outside. Do your job in a sense and don't lose the game for this team. So, but because of the Raiders and the Chiefs, I have the Broncos coming in at number 3. And then to round it out, we've got those new LA Chargers.
Did I say San Diego Chargers when I did my prediction?
We'll have to go back and look. And if you did, that's going to be a blooper.
If I did, you got 100%. Yeah.
100%.
I just Anthony Lynn myself.
Yeah, you did. Very much so. That was a good one. And coming in last, I've got the Chargers. Listen, they do have talent. They get Keenan Allen back, who I'm actually really excited to see. I hope he plays well. He's been injured the last couple of years, hasn't been able to play at all. I hope that he stays, healthy and he can play because Phillip Rivers, that's a big target for Phillip Rivers. You have Melvin Gordon, who last year came on really, really strong. Melvin Gordon's rookie year, it was almost kind of like, oh man, is this guy going to be a bust? And then last year he came on really strong for this team. Offensively, I think their offensive line is what is going to hinder them from really being productive offensively. I think Phillip Rivers can throw the ball around, and they do have receivers and weapons, but their offensive line, I don't think, gives Rivers enough time to make enough plays to win. Defensively, up front, I think they're very stout. When you've got Joey Bosa, Corey Liuget, Melvin Ingram, that's a really, really great front. Brandon Mebane as well, big guy. It's really their linebacking corps that I have a little problem with. They did lose Denzel Perriman, who was their starting middle linebacker. He's going to be out for at least the first 6 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. But on the outside, you've got Jason Verrett, Casey Hayward, who led the NFL in interceptions last year. And then they bring over Trey Boston, the free safety from the Carolina Panthers.
No stars in that secondary, though.
So no real superstars on this team. And when you're in the division with Kansas City and Oakland, you need some superstars on defense, especially in the secondary. So once again, I have Oakland as the slight first team, Kansas City Chiefs, Denver Broncos, and then the Chargers to round it out.
There you go. Okay, so we got one more segment to go. We'll take a very quick break right here. We'll come back with the NFC West and finish out the podcast. About 10 more minutes. We'll be right back here on the Cover 2 podcast.
Yeah, I don't think the window's closing. I think we come back with a healthy team. You look at Russell Wilson, no knee injury this year. You get Earl Thomas back. Cam is healthy. Sherm is healthy. Bobby's healthy. We got a healthy core and nucleus of guys, and I think we got a lot of young guys who are stepping up, and I think because of that, I don't think the window's closing. We have so many great players and so many great opportunities to make big plays and guys who are coming back like Noe, and then Jimmy Graham's under another year with Russell. And I think he had a great year last year. And on top of that, we just got a lot of great players.
So goals for next year. I mean, do you set personal goals?
Oh, yeah, I definitely do. I got to have personal goals. My thing right now is I want to get 1,000 receiving and 1,000 rushing. Like Marshall Faulk, there's not a lot of running backs who've done that. And I was so close last year. I'm so bummed that I didn't get it. Yeah. So I think that's my one main personal goal.
OC Rock Radio, this is the Cover 2 podcast. 10 more minutes to go. We're going to have to hurry through the NFC West, but we're going to give you your money's worth on this one. I'll start with the NFC West with the bottom half. I think it will go faster if we do it this way. The bottom half of the division looks like this. It's the 49ers and Rams. I think we can both agree with that they're going to be third and fourth. I believe we both agree that the Rams and 49ers, it'll be Rams and 49ers third and fourth like that. 49ers don't have much on offense. You really got to look at their defense if you want to look at their future. They're definitely rebuilding. Eric Armstead, DeForest Buckner, Elvis Dumerville, and Solomon Thomas rounded a very good defensive line. And they also have Reuben Foster and Navarro Bowman and linebacker Eric Reed as their top DB. Other than that, not much to watch with the 49ers other than this Colin Kaepernick drama. The Rams, being from LA, we'll talk about them a lot. So you'll definitely hear a lot about the Rams this season. Can Goff not be as bad this year? That's a single thing. They have a new head coach. Wade Phillips is also there as an assistant, and I think they're going to be better than they were last year. Todd Gurley will be better. Sammy Watkins comes over from the Bills. Aaron Donald is not there yet, but he continues to do his holdout, and I think that will affect them as long as he's not there, because he's a real key in their on their defense. They also have Mark Barron, Alec Ogletree, Robert Quinn, among others. Also Tremaine Johnson. But those two teams will be at the bottom of the division. Do you want to say any words about the 49ers and Rams?
Yeah, no, I really agree. Neither of these teams, I think I see, making an impact this year. I think they're both in rebuilding mode in a sense. With the Rams, what are we going to see from Jared Goff? First-year head coach, new offensive system. It's one of those things, again, where he's a rookie and he was learning a new system last year, and now he has to start all over again to learn a new system. So how is he going to be able to adjust? They do get Sammy Watkins, which is a really, really nice pickup for him. And then, of course, they still have Todd Gurley. But Todd Gurley, I think, has something to prove. After last year, when everyone expected big things and he really didn't do much, it's going to be on Todd Gurley and Jared Goff to lead this team. Can that offensive line do enough and make holes for Todd Gurley? And then switching over to the Niners, I mean, they don't have a lot of holes either. Nope. You can plug them in as probably one of the top 5 worst teams this year. It's Brian Hoyer's team.
They'll be looking for a quarterback for sure.
It's Brian Hoyer's team, and we're gonna say it. I'm gonna say it all along. I still think Kirk Cousins is going there next year, but for now,
interesting.
Yeah, I think this is Brian Hoyer's team. They did sign Pierre Garçon to a big contract. He's gonna make like $15 million this year, so you can expect him to be seeing a lot of targets. They did trade away, probably in my opinion, their best tight end and Vance McDonald. They traded him to the Steelers, so one less weapon that they have. And really defensively, the defensive line is really good. Eric Armstead, and then Solomon Thomas, obviously. They still have Navarro Bowman. But really, they don't have enough weapons to compete at all. So, no, I do agree with you. Those are the 2 bottom teams.
Now, who are your top 2 teams?
My top 2, I'm going to go with, I'll just keep going, rising up. So, my second team in the division, I'm going to go with the Cardinals. I think this team to me it's another one of those teams that's like a mixed bag. They have the weapons, but they're also a little long in the tooth in some spots. Mm-hmm. I see this being Carson Palmer and Larry Fitzgerald's last year in the league. So obviously they're going to have, they're going to want to give it everything they have and come out and try to stay healthy and do what they can. I just don't know if that's going to be enough. David Johnson, talk about a workhorse. He is going to carry the load this year for this team.
Absolutely.
Running the ball, receiving out of the backfield, they're going to rely on him, I think.
He wants 2,000 yards.
I think almost too much. I think teams are really going to bear down on him and force Carson Palmer to throw to his receivers. And, I think that's eventually David Johnson is going to wear down. For as great of a back that he is, defensively they lose Tony Jefferson, and they have to replace him with Antonio Bethea. Who I don't think is as good, but when you still have Patrick Peterson and Tyrann Mathieu, I think that kind of makes up for it. And then, you still have Jones as the outside linebacker, who they signed to a big contract extension as well. And Hassan Reddick, who they drafted in the first round. So this team it's kind of, like I said, a mixed bag. I think they can make some noise, but I think the Seattle team, who I'm going to pick to win the division, is just a little more competitive and has too much going for them, with Russell Wilson hopefully being healthy. They've got Eddie Lacy and Thomas Rawls. I think they're going to split carries this year. And then, you've got Doug Baldwin, who, even though I don't think they have a true number 1 receiver, I think Russell Wilson does a really, really good job of spreading the ball around and, not really being one-sided to any of his receivers. And then defensively, even though they are getting a little longer than the tooth as well, you still have the Legion of Boom. And then when you want to add Sheldon Richardson, one of the best defensive tackles in the league, that only helps you. So for those reasons, I'm picking Seattle to win the division.
I gotcha. We have similar opinions about the 2 teams. I just have the Seahawks second, Cardinals first. This is not a homer pick. I actually did really look into this. The Seahawks, to me, their offensive line is just nowhere of where it was last couple of years. And I think I saw it last year. I mean, the Cardinals won the season series against the Seahawks. It ended up being a one win and one tie. The Cardinals should have won the game that tied, and that was kind of their whole season. A lot of the close games, most of them, they lost. I just think that will turn around a little bit. I believe they were 7-8-1 last season. I think they get to at least 10 wins this season. I think this comes down to probably one of their late game meetings. Whoever wins that game probably will win the division. I just think the Cardinals will eventually topple them just because they beat them last year. And as far as their offensive line didn't improve, and they actually lost their left tackle to a season-ending injury already. You're right, the defense did add Sheldon Richardson. It's still a formidable defense, but we showed we could beat it, and we have no trouble beating them at home. I keep saying we, because I'm a Cardinals fan. Sorry, it's a biased thing, but so this will be very tough. I think I see both these teams being around 10-6, 11-5. It's going to be a crapshoot. I'm just going to pick the Cardinals just because they won the season series last year. I think the defense got better even though they lost some guys. Tyrann Mathieu, I think, is going to be the stud that he was 2 years ago. Patrick Peterson's the same. Nkemdiche and Justin Bethel, they really need to help out the team too, because Nkemdiche's filling in for Calais Campbell, and Justin Bethel's filling in for that vacant second corner spot that hasn't been a guy since Antonio Cromartie was there. Other than that, the two-headed monster on the line of Chandler Jones and Marcus Golden, two guys that can get sacks for days. I think that will help them out too. But this will come down to special teams for them and close games. Because I think that was their biggest thing last year is they didn't win the close games. I think they'll win more of them this year, and that's why I think they'll win 10 or 11 games for sure. So we do have about 4 minutes ago. We do have more time left than we thought. So let's pick some MVPs. Jared, who is your MVP of the NFL?
I'm going Aaron Rodgers this year. I think Tom Brady could be a close second because I think he's still very, very elite. But I think Aaron Rodgers is going to come back, lead his team to the playoffs again, and more so just because of his numbers, more or less. We know that he can make it to the playoffs. I think he's going to have a really, really solid season numbers-wise. So I'm going to give the edge to Aaron Rodgers slightly over Tom Brady.
I'm going to give it to Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr will have a fantastic season for the Raiders. He was in the running last year. I think he'll, just an improved system, I think he'll do well with that team. And I think Lynch will help him out too at running back. So I think he'll end up winning that MVP, and the Raiders will go far. Do you have a Rookie of the Year pick as well?
Christian McCaffrey.
Christian McCaffrey?
Yeah, I think he's going to do – he's so versatile. Like I said, out of the backfield in the slot, he's going to be able to do so much for this team. And I think combined rushing and receiving yards, he'll be over 1,000 yards for the year.
Absolutely. I'm going to go Deshaun Watson. I think Deshaun Watson will eventually take over the spot for the Texans. I think he'll lead them to the playoffs if he really does play well and he is the Rookie of the Year. And I just think if you take over a team at quarterback, it's a lot more, because I do think the one thing about Christian McCaffrey is I don't think he'll play. He won't be the feature kind of guy in that offense, and I think that's what will keep him out of it if Deshaun Watson does end up playing. But that's kind of I'm a little iffy on that one. It was hard to pick a Rookie of the Year. Super Bowl pick, just kind of not off the top of your head, but just based on what we've talked about. Who is your two Super Bowl teams? You don't really have to pick a winner, just the two teams from the NFC and the AFC to get in.
It's kind of tough, and I wanted to pick my Cowboys, but I don't know if they're gonna, with Zeke being out, I don't know if they're gonna be able to fill that hole and win enough games to make it. I still see them making the playoffs, obviously, but I think not having Zeke for those 6 games is gonna hurt. So with that said, because I picked Aaron Rodgers to win MVP, I think he's gonna have a great year. I'm going with the Packers, and I see the Patriots getting back. I mean, there's too much talent, so I'm going Packers, Patriots. I'm not going to give a winner, but I'm just going to Packers, Patriots.
I have to agree with you. Packers, I think you're getting there. I think Aaron Rodgers, this is the year he gets in for the second time, and he wins that his second Super Bowl, really becomes one of the best quarterbacks of all time. Kind of gets that Peyton Manning threshold. For the AFC, a little bit surprised. I'm going Pittsburgh Steelers. I think this is Big Ben's last year. I think he'll go all out for it. I think they'll end up beating the Patriots in the playoffs. And I think the Steelers, with all that offense and a solid defense, I think will end up getting in. And Big Ben, I'm not going to say who I think is going to win. I do think Big Ben and Aaron Rodgers is a great quarterback matchup too.
So
kind
of a rematch of the 2011.
Exactly. That's what I thought about too. So that should be interesting as well. that is going to come at the end of this podcast. Probably the longest one we've ever done, right?
Yeah.
I mean, definitely, at least on the air here at OC Rock Radio. I'm Nick Nina.
I'm Jared Smith.
And this has been the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio.